What's going on, guys? Welcome to episode 2 of Poker Pals podcast. And the guest today is Nicholas Walsh, PokerStars Ambassador, commentator, spin and go extraordinaire. What's happening, Nick? Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I feel honored. I feel honored to be invited so early. Thank you very much for having me.
No, of course. Listen, you were one of my first, probably earliest, streamer friends, poker pals. Yeah, literally poker pals. But I feel like we see each other at live events, but because we're so busy, you're commentating, I'm playing. This is why I want to get people on. I've made so many poker pals in poker now over the last 4 years of doing this full time, but I've never actually sat down at these live events. You have a few drinks, you obviously make like conversations, but I want to get deep with each one of the guests. I want to hear their story, how they got into poker, basically learn more about them. So, if you want to take me back on, you don't have to get too deep into your childhood, but let the people know more about you and then how you got into poker.
All right, so yeah, we can talk about it a little bit, I guess. So, as you guys might be able to tell from my accent, I'm from the United States originally. I was born in Racine, Wisconsin, which is sort of 40 minutes, an hour north of sort of Chicago, across the border into Illinois. I lived there until I was 8 years old, and then when my parents separated, they found different partners, and I decided that I was going to move, or they decided for me, I should say, that I would move to the United Kingdom with my stepdad and my mom. So I moved to the UK, and then I ended up living here pretty much for the rest of my life. I've moved around a little bit in the interim, but around sort of university times, I sort of decided that I was going to start getting more into poker because it was something that my family did around sort of the kitchen table at home. At family events. So like over Christmas and stuff, sometimes the adults would get together. They pull out this giant jar, like the size, it was like as big as I was when I was a kid. And they would just be filled with pennies. And then they dish out the pennies and they'd play for pennies. I'm assuming it was like, 7-card stud or something back then. But we were always never allowed to play because the kids weren't allowed to play. So our uncles used to tell us, hey, we're going to go play poker, leave us alone. So we'd pop in and we'd say, can we play this year? And they'd say, wait a minute, how old are you this year? And we'd say, oh, we're 7 or whatever. And they'd go, sorry, you have to be 8 to play. And that would just increase every year. We were never allowed to play with the adults basically over time. So it sort of had this mystique because I never was allowed to learn it. I was never allowed to play it, but it just seemed like they were having a lot of fun. It looked like it was a very social thing. And it just reminds me of home, to be honest. It reminds me of, family getting together. So there's kind of this sort of deep set, sort of a wholesome sort of aspect associated for me. So when I got to university, I was really, really into the idea of playing more poker. And I sort of came to the realization, like, I can go to the casino now. I'm old enough to do this now. But rather than go straight to the casino, I ended up getting involved with the first ever Brighton University Poker Society. I helped organize those games. And that sort of became quite big in our local because we were sort of, I think, do you remember the Riley snooker halls? You remember this sort of chain that?
Yeah.
So these
It's
like pool halls.
it's crazy how similar our upbringing and stories were in poker. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
The Poker Society, I was the same in Liverpool. Yeah, exactly the same.
exactly that. So basically, we're like, hey, can we use your space? Do you have a license to allow us to do that? They're like, yes. So we started running the games just for the students, just for the university students, and then all the locals wanted to play. And before you know it, we had like 8 tables running. We had cash games going and stuff like that, for like super micro stakes or whatever. But it was so much fun, and I just fell in love with it. And I was also enamored with the idea that poker was something that you could do professionally, or you could do it well enough to make money from it, in the long term. And I guess that set me off on a wayward youth, misspent youth of playing cards. During university, I finished my university degree and all that stuff too. But then, yeah, I just decided that I was going to play more poker, and at some point started taking it more seriously. And now I find myself being a PokerStars ambassador as a result of my content creation. So yeah, I feel very blessed to have arrived here in that fashion.
Do you have to pinch yourself sometimes? Because I still hasn't fully hit me that yeah, I am a professional poker player and I'm like sponsored and like do this full time. Like, have you
It
still kind
does.
of got that feeling?
Yeah, and actually, Lucas, I think of you very fondly in this light because, as you say, Lucas sort of said, "Oh, we're very similar. We sort of came up at the same time." I think it's more than that. Like we experienced a life-changing aspect at the same time. It was a very bonding experience because we both sort of got into the industry and were accepted and became ambassadors and became sponsored around the same time, which for me, and I know for you as well, was always a dream because I remember thinking, man, it would be cool to be good at poker, but also, man, wouldn't it be cool to be able to call yourself an ambassador of the game, right? That was a real, like, you've made it moment for me. And so, when I think back to us meeting up after we had both got signed, I remember just looking across the table at you and just being like, mate, isn't this a bit mental? And you're just like, yeah. And I could just tell that we both sort of felt the same way. And also a funny story regarding that as well. Um, I received a big thick stack of patches in sort of a white envelope. And I didn't know what it was. It arrived in the white envelope, and I opened it, and it was just a stack of PokerStars patches. And I cried like a little girl the first time I received my patches. I was like, I looked at my girlfriend at the time and I was like, do you realize what this represents to me? You realize this is like years of like being really bad at poker and then being average at poker and then maybe being slightly better than other people at poker. And to have arrived there, it really felt full circle, and it was really rewarding.
Yeah, it's literally, it's like being signed by PokerStars, and obviously I work with PokerStars through Poker News, obviously both under the same company. That is just the dream. Like growing up, what for me was like PokerStars. It was like that's the brand. You know what I mean? Like you see all the biggest names in poker, like high stakes poker. Obviously, before that was like Full Tilt, which then obviously Stars took over. And yeah, it's to just say that like. And when I saw you get signed, because like I said, you were my earliest, but one of the earliest poker pals.
Right.
Remember Lex Live? The second Lex Live was when basically we that was probably the first time we met, because that was the first time I met a lot of people in poker.
Yeah. Was it the one in
And
London?
the one in London, yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
at that time, were you sponsored by Stars then?
So that's a good question. I think technically, and again, we'll talk about probably more about my actual sponsorship in a minute. But I think at that time I might have been already considered a Power Up ambassador, if you guys remember that game.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that
Power Up. Yeah.
but also but also it was so early. There's a chance as well that it might have just been us sort of faking it till we made it, because myself and my business partners at the time were basically like, we want to be part of this. We want to be doing this. And as a result, we were really immersing ourselves in the culture. But I think at that point, we were just on the cusp of actually getting some sort of official title associated with our work. Yeah.
Yeah. So just take me back, just when you talked about university. I was the same, played loads in the university, studied more poker than my actual degree, hence why I dropped out after a year. Were you playing cash then, tournaments? And then, so what did you start off with? Because I always like to ask this question, because then obviously your thing was, like you've just talked about, then Power Up and then spinning goes, right? So what did you start off with in poker?
Yeah, let me take you through the poker years then. So basically, I started out playing the tournaments that we were running with the Poker Society. As far as I was aware, they're kind of I wasn't really even sure about what was cash, what was tournaments at that point. Anyway, we were just sort of getting involved in learning as I was going. So I started playing tournaments in a group setting in a live environment. And then very quickly, those games, as we busted players, the regulars and the locals in that bar, they just wanted to carry on the fun, carry on the having some drinks and playing some cards. So we would play cash games, and I realized very quickly I preferred the cash element. I preferred the sort of nobody's going home until they're done. You know what I mean? I didn't like this sort of like, okay, let's all agree we're going to meet at 8 and we'll play a tournament, but then Jerry busts first, and then he's sitting around doing nothing and moping, and he's pissed off because whatever. I like the idea that we could all just sit and play cash, and it would just go infinitely. It would just go like right into the sort of early hours. So at that point, I started to play more live cash. And then all along this time, I was playing, more poker online as well. And immediately I was drawn to sit and goes online, which is obviously really unique to our generation, right? That's not a thing that really existed previously, at least not in the sense that we're describing. And I like the idea. It was a combination of both. It was sort of a short amount of time that things needed to get done. There was a limited number of players, so it played it similarly to a cash game in the sense that you could walk away when you wanted to. But then at the same time, it was something that you could sort of play units of, because I like the idea that I was like, I'm going to play 50 games today, and I'm going to see how I go and track that. Whereas the cash games, obviously, you're like, hey, how was your session? Oh, I won $37.47 or whatever. And all of that sort of unevenness didn't play well with my sort of my OCD or something like that. So I started to play a lot more sit and goes. I was no good at all, but I persisted with that. And then after some time, I really couldn't figure out what I was enjoying because I was playing a lot of live cash because I was doing quite well in that. I was playing sit and goes, and I probably was one of the worst players that was playing those stakes at the time, but I was sort of improving. But tournaments just never really vibed for me. I always felt like they were too slow for my sort of nature, and I also just really suffered from this sort of sense that it felt a bit degen to me because number one, I wasn't winning and I wasn't any good. But then number two as well, I felt like after I busted a tournament, I felt really negatively about poker, and I just felt like, oh, I don't know, like maybe I'm just wasting my time. Whereas the other stuff felt like I was sort of building towards something, moving forward. Excuse me, moving forward. But yeah, at that point, I just decided that I wanted to sort of play more sit and goes because it sort of matched my lifestyle. It gave me the freedom to kind of stop and start when I wanted to. I liked the fact that you sort of would agree with yourself to play a certain number of units, and it felt a bit scientific. It felt a little bit like this month I'm going to play this many and I'm going to see how it goes. And it just felt like I had a little bit more sort of control in the sort of analysis of whether or not I was improving before I even knew about trackers or any of this other sort of stuff that we sort of take for granted now. And that sort of carried on for some time. And I suppose you could say that I improved on my own, but I really had the sense that I was going to try and figure it out on my own, which was probably one of the biggest mistakes I made in my early poker career. Because I thought, it's going to be an organic thing that you just work out as you go. But there's so many things in poker that are sometimes a little bit counterintuitive that you need somebody to tell you and to show you before you can kind of figure it out. So I'm going along. I've graduated university. I got my degree. I got sort of a real-ish job for a little bit. For a little while, I was working at the casino in between finding my university job. And then eventually I went into web development, which actually had nothing to do with my degree, but I taught myself how to do
What
coding.
was your degree in? Don't mind me
It was
asking.
just boring business management. But it was here in Brighton, which was important for me because I live in Brighton, UK, and I love it here. And it was something that was important to me to be here more so than the degree itself.
Yeah.
So after that,
so you moved straight from just going back a bit further. Sorry to keep going back.
No,
so you
no, it's
moved
fine.
from America to Brighton. Was that the first place you moved
No,
in the UK?
no, sorry. I moved to the UK when I was 8 years old. So I've been here basically all of my young life. So I went to school here right from being a child all the way into high school and then straight to university. And then ended up in University of Brighton, which is kind of where the poker journey began. If that makes sense.
Was that hard? Like at 8 years old, obviously, I think it's a bit harder when you're probably a bit older. But was that hard transitioning from America to the UK? Like, because obviously at that point, 8 years old, you're obviously old enough to kind of remember like the things, right? So obviously you remember the transition. What was like the main things that was different from America to the UK that you remember thinking like was really hard to kind of like to compare?
I think 8 is kind of an okay-ish age because, like you say, you kind of remember it, but it's not like you're a teenager and you've established like all of these sort of deep set mentalities about who you are and the people that you want to associate with and stuff. So I remember being super excited and totally on board with it as a kid. And then obviously living in the UK, just a bit of a culture shock. I don't really recall too much of what it was like before in the States, to be honest. So I guess I'll live it. In many ways, I'm just kind of English because I was so young when I moved that I've sort of adopted it. But yeah, I suppose it was difficult in the sense that I was away from my sort of my dad who still lives in the States and my stepmom and my brothers and sisters out there as well, and the rest of my family for that matter. But I guess it wasn't all that bruising for me. It wasn't until much later I realized that it was sort of unusual. So I guess they caught me just before it was sort of a big upheaval, if that makes sense.
Yeah, at that age where because like I said, when you're a teenager, then it's hard to kind of transition. And obviously 8 years old, you have friends, but like once you're like 15, 16, you have friends that you grew up with all your life and you kind of like, they're like your family. So then trying to then fit into like high school, right?
Yeah.
Obviously coming over with a different accent and stuff like that.
I was lucky in that regard too, because I went to international school when I got here to the
Right.
UK. So they followed sort of roughly the same American curriculum, but then also everybody else kind of had a weird accent, or they were from somewhere exotic, or South Korea, or the UAE, or United States or Canada was very common. But yeah, that was okay for me. That segment.
Yeah. So then going back to the poker, so you're
Yeah.
saying playing cash games, and then at what point did so you said about the power up, and then you said about the spin and goes, so you're playing sit and goes. So obviously then you said that tournaments are a bit more kind of like long for you. It's funny because nowadays it's like with this like TikTok generation and stuff. It's like the question I always get asked, like, how do you sit there for hours and play tournaments? Is like people just can't comprehend doing that right now.
Yeah,
It's just like quick, and that's why these like you see these like the likes of like spin and goes and stuff are so
yeah,
popular
yeah,
because it's so quick. You know what I mean? People can play them like and be done within a few minutes
yeah,
rather than hours. So at what
yeah. I
point
mean,
did they kind of start getting introduced into you?
so that was the thing is after I sort of rejoined the real world, as it were. I was still playing cards all along this time that I became a web developer and I was working various jobs. But at that point, I was like, look, I want to really take this start taking this seriously. And at that point, I had embedded myself into a community here in Brighton of poker players, including quite a large contingent of German poker players. And if you guys don't kind of know the mythology or like the sort of history of this, what happened at one stage is lots and lots of German players left Germany because they were making a lot of money playing poker, and the tax laws over there are a little bit weird and a little bit strict. So I was meeting people who were coming through Brighton because it was really close to Germany. You know, they were English speaking, and a lot of those guys were very good at the games that they played. So at that point, Lucas, is when I sort of said, "Hey, can you guys coach me?" And at that point, spin and go was becoming quite popular. So I got coached to play spin and goes at that point, and that was really where I started to take things a little bit more seriously from a sort of professional perspective, because I was really locked into trying to make this more of my life and step more away from, you know, conventional work. And that's kind of where the spinning goes got introduced. At that point as well, I spent some time in Thailand as well. I moved out there after doing this epic journey. I don't know if you want to hear about my whole vlogging days. uh,
Yeah, do it, man. That I was just going to
actually
ask you, like,
actually
all
blogging
about like
days.
how you got into like. I didn't know you done vlogs, you see. So yeah, yeah. Tell us the stories.
I'm so used to saying vlogs. It was actually just straight blogs. So I started writing my sort of blog on I think it was Poker Strategy, if you guys remember that website. And I was basically just writing about my experiences, about trying to become better, and I was just trying to keep a track of, you know, like playing more cash games and stuff like that as well, and if I could make a go of it. And I ended up in communication with a group of guys, a group of players that were out in Thailand, and they were kind of living the sort of dream at the time, where they were playing cards out there. They were making a living from it, and they had this beautiful sort of mansion that they had built out there. And they were looking for people to sort of invite into the group to coach and to stake. And I contacted them and I asked them, you know, what would it take for me to come and join you guys? And they sort of said, you know, if you can win over this many big blinds per hundred, we'll consider you for the position. And then I documented all of my progress in this blog about, you know, like graphs, and I was like, you know, posting memes and video music that I was listening to when I was grinding, and my mindset and how bad it was. And, you know, going back and reading some of it now, it's like really cringe, like how tilted I was getting, but how I was dealing with it and all that stuff. And eventually they accepted. So I ended up, like, literally the very next day after they accepted, booking a ticket to Thailand and flying straight out there and getting
And
heavily
you'd never
coached,
met these
and
guys before.
never met them before in my life, just knew them from online, took a huge leap of faith. It all happened so quickly, and before you knew it, I was out there living in Thailand and Chiang Mai, and I was there for like over a year, and kind of getting coached and just you know, trying to improve my cash, and also mingling at that time around with the guys who were like the original Supernova Elite crushers as well. Like, I think one of the guys in that house was one of the first guys to hit Supernova Elite multiple times, because he was playing like, you know, 1K heads up hypers and stuff like this on mass
Wow.
volume. Um, and yeah, I suppose
Do
at that
people know
point,
any of the like online names or anything?
if I remember right, he might have had the username Moldy Onions or something like that, but I don't know if that's
Mm-hmm.
like one of those memories that I've picked up. But again, that was more passive because I was focusing on the cash game thing, and I was getting coached for
Yeah.
spins as well at the same time. But I think the important takeaway was, at this point, I was surrounding myself by people who knew how to play cards well, and also had the capacity to teach me how to be better.
Yeah.
And also, you know, rather than me guessing, I was actually taking it more professionally. And then after that, you know, just
So at
really
this
leaning
point,
in.
you'd quit your job to do this full time, had you?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I was still doing like odd jobs in the sort of web space, but it really wasn't enough to sort of sustain what I was doing. At that point, poker was becoming an actual income for me, so I was actually, you know, supporting my meager lifestyle, sort of you know, living in cool places, traveling around. For a little while, I lived in Slovenia as well. And just traveling and just meeting people who kind of knew what they were talking about, and learning from them as I went, really.
Mhm. And then, so you said you were there for a year. So you're doing these blogs, and then at what point then were you then move to like spin and goes full time? And then at what point then did you like the Twitch start to come into it? Because I assume
Yeah.
that you were obviously when you then got sponsored by Stars, it was obviously from getting recognized from the stream. So then like how long were you playing kind of full time before you then went into streaming?
So it's hard to say. I think it was probably a fair few years where I was just focusing on playing heads up hypers and spins. At that point, I had really locked into those formats. I was still playing live cash, but I would say that I was playing full time for maybe 2 years, maybe slightly longer, depending on when you're counting from. If you're counting, when I was actually traveling and stuff, probably a fair few years at that point. And then also, it was around that time that that my friend James mentioned to me, "Hey, we should stream. I think you'd be good on stream." Sorry. He
It's all good.
mentioned, yeah, I think we should start streaming. I think he'd be good on stream. And there's this new game coming out called Power Up. Have you heard of it? And so I said, no, I've never heard of this before. He's like, it's basically a mix between Magic the Gathering and poker. And I think between us, we could be really, really good at this. And actually, all due credit to James. This was very much something that he had spotted ahead of time, and also he has the kind of mind that really, really was good at working that kind of thing out and trying to figure out the meta of the game when it was something that was brand new. So for those of you that don't know, like I said, Power Up is basically Magic the Gathering and a three-handed winner-take-all sit-and-go combined, where you had to use energy to play cards, and the cards would augment the outcome of the board. You could destroy board cards. You could draw cards off the top of the deck. You could like shuffle the deck and all this kind of weird stuff. They actually invented loads of different ways you could do it. And that released shortly after, and I started streaming that. And the idea was, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we got noticed by PokerStars and they took us seriously? And I don't know, 6 months after we started streaming to a relatively limited audience, Stars spotted us and they were like, "You guys are good. We like you. We'd like to have a conversation with you." And that's kind of when the negotiation began to become an ambassador.
Can you remember the day that you got contacted from them?
It was a slow process. I don't remember the
Right.
specific day, because what ended up happening was, those of you that watch my streams will know PokerStars Strag, longtime
Yeah.
PokerStars employee and
I know
top
him
dog
from
over there
they obviously lived in the Isle of Man for
from Isle of
like
Man,
8 years.
right?
Well, yeah, it's
Yeah.
like 10 years. So yeah, he's Strug's the best.
He's a legend. He was the guy floating around in our chat, kind of like his presence was sort of a hint that we were coming under suspicion, that we were getting noticed, and it was really his push that got us over the line to, would you like to come and meet us in the Isle of Man and have a conversation about your future? I don't remember that day specifically. I just remember us building up to it for ages, because it just took so long for us to finally like get to that point where we were actually going to go and have a real conversation. But I do remember the day that we arrived in the Isle of Man. We went and had this meeting. They showed us around the offices. They sat us down. We pitched them, what we kind of had in mind. And then we left the office and basically just were completely buzzing. It was, that was a real magical moment, because it really felt like it was becoming a reality at that stage.
Mhm. So just go back just to Thailand. So what was that like? Because that's what I wanted to ask you. You said that you were kind of just doing your own thing. It was getting you to a certain standard and certain points, but you felt like you needed to surround yourself with professional poker players to then take you to that next level.
Yeah.
People watching this may be inspired to do poker full time. They may be in a similar spot where they're playing on the side of their job. They are trying to study. They don't really know what to study. What would you say? What would you say is the main things to go from that spot of playing on the side of a job to then doing it full time?
So the main thing that I always say to everyone who asks a similar question is, make sure you figure out what you like, because don't listen to anyone that tells you, oh, there's no money in cash, there's no money in sit and goes, there's no money in tournaments anymore, all this nonsense. Like, really, the most important thing about making or taking poker seriously, not just making a living, or taking it, you don't have to take it to that nth degree. If you want to play poker and take it seriously, you just have to find a format that you enjoy. That's the most important first step, because a lot of people will come to me and they'll say, "Oh, I'm not really sure why you do this, because everyone says there's no money in it." And I'm like, I wouldn't take part in something that I don't think that I could beat, or I didn't think there was an edge of some variety. So step one, find the game that you like. Step two, and this is something that everyone always overlooks, just bankroll management, bankroll management, bankroll management. It's no fun being a loser. It's no fun punting off your roll every 5 days or every month and then feeling frustrated. It's no fun feeling like you're going backwards when you're trying to go forwards. So remember, it's cool to play lower stakes online. It's cool to play in lower stakes games that you can afford to play in while you're learning. And at some point, something will switch and you'll feel the confidence that you require in order to play higher stakes. But you're also going to do it in a way which allows you to stomach the swings and actually sort of survive when things aren't going well. And I think this is massively underestimated. I had a friend once tell me, you realize that bankroll is also an edge. And I was like, well, if you got the buy-in, what's the difference? And they're like, no, you don't understand. If I sit down with you and you have 4 buy-ins in a cash game or any other game, and we play a bunch of poker, you go broke and I take all your money and you have no way to get it back from me. And that's a form of edge in itself. So if you don't have the role to play the games that you want to play in, you will send yourself broke eventually because you will run bad eventually. And the players that have been playing badly against you this whole time will end up taking your money. You've got no recourse. So I think it's really cool to remember that bankroll management is super important. And then number 3, I would say find help from someone that you know is doing well. They don't have to be the best player in the world, but find somebody that you can trust, because there's a lot of people out there saying that they're good at this, but they're not very good at it. And figure out how they're studying, try and follow their method, and perhaps their preflop material sources and their post-flop material sources and all that kind of stuff. And then get down and work. And hopefully studying should be a fun part of the process that takes you from being a losing player into a good player.
Yeah, I always say like the best players in the world are literally the ones that have worked the hardest. That's just guaranteed, and that's what I do love about poker. And obviously, there is obviously short-term variance, but long-term, like the best players in the world are the best players in the world for a reason. They
Yeah.
haven't just got lucky to be the best players in the world. A little fun story about you said about the bankroll. I remember obviously we're mutual friends, Brandon, who obviously works for PokerStars. So he was like one of my first friends that I met in poker, because I moved to the Isle of Man when I was like 18. Was working in my family fish and chip shop, and I was just playing poker on the side, and he used to play in the local casino in the Isle of Man. And I remember probably used to only earn like maybe, I'm trying to think, a week, maybe 200, 300 pounds a week, something like that. And I used to just spend all my wages on going and playing poker. And at the time, there was only one. I used to prefer tournaments. And like you said, like I always say to people, do what you enjoy. I've personally just always loved tournaments. I've loved the romantic side of tournaments, of the story of there being one
I
winner,
understand.
of you know what I mean. And cash is just for me. Just I never kind of fully got it and enjoyed it, but it was the only thing to play to get better. And we used to play cash games. That used to go, and it used to be like my week's wages on the table. So I was always just like not bankrolled for it. I was like playing scared money. This is still one of the funniest hands I've ever played. It was there wasn't many good players like in the Isle of Man, obviously, because there was no professional players. But there was like obviously people at work for PokerStars were the best players, because at least they knew what they were doing, right, in terms of poker. But there was some crazy players, like there always is in live cash game. So then there was this one, night, and there was this guy. I'm not going to name names, but he was just on Mega Till. He was just playing just any two. He was trying to get unstuck. There was a spot where someone limps, he raises big, and I have jacks in the big blind, and I end up 3-betting, and then it goes like all in, all in. And both the guys that went all in were like super crazy players, but I now know like that's just a snap with jacks, right? Like even though not knowing ranges, there's these two people, jacks. I'm just like fist pumping, like getting it in. But obviously then, because I didn't know ranges, I didn't know proper to play cash games, I was playing scared money. I was like, this is my week. I've just worked so hard to earn this money. I do not want to lose this money. And this is where my obviously brain has changed now. It's like,
Sure.
I see the opportunity to win that money. I'm going to do a profitable kind of investment, a profitable play with the jacks. But then I was like, I don't want to lose my money. So I folded, right? Kept my cards, debated it for a few minutes, kept my cards. Flop comes, they both don't show obviously because they show at the end in cash games. Flop comes out, jack. So I would have flop quads.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.
And my face, and Brandon just looks at me, and just my face is just like, and then they both show ace king, and I actually show my jacks. And like Brandon still to this day just rips me for this, and it's still so funny. But that's a prime example of just playing scared money, man. And but I also do think like you said about your blogs and looking back and like it's like oh cringy. I feel the same, but you've got to go through that to get better in anything, right?
Yeah, and actually, I would highly recommend anyone sort of do that, even if it's a private thing, just because it's nice to look back and realize where you've come from, and also realize how you've improved. Because I think that knowing where you came from is a really good process in knowing where you're going and where you're heading, and actually knowing that you're making progress is already in itself really cool. And again, to the bankroll management point there as well, I say to people, if you want to play games like spins, it's obviously a ridiculous game. Honestly, it really is. It's very high variance. If you want to beat those games, it's not just a case that you need the bankroll to stomach the downswings, but you also need the mindset, like you said, and the number of people that go, I can get away with 100, no problem. I'm going, you probably could if you're playing lower stakes. You don't need that many buy-ins. But if you lose half your bankroll in the first week of this bankroll challenge you're doing or whatever, are you going to continue to play as solidly as you did, knowing that you've got a deeper pockets to play? And ultimately, the answer is almost always no. I know what I'm like. And also, I think poker is about knowing yourself more than it is about your opponents. It's very art of war, isn't it? The art of war, like if you know your opponent and not yourself, you'll suffer 1,000 defeats or whatever the quote is. I think that's so true, because unless you know how you respond to those situations and how to manage your emotions, how to manage your own bankroll, and to understand about how you play optimally and what are the conditions you require to win, then you'll never really get better at poker. Because if you can't be honest with yourself, then nobody else is going to help you out in this game.
Yeah, exactly. And just going on, people watching this that do want to potentially delve deep into spin and go. So actually, just before I ask them about like the kind of the tips you would recommend for spin and goes, because I
Yeah.
know that is your main game. But so you went from power up, and then at what point then did you kind of was power up like a profitable game? Like was you were you making like a lot of
It
money on
was
on
it
playing there?
it it was very profitable, except the stakes that sort of were available didn't mean that we were making absolutely tons, but the actual win rate was huge because it was unequivocally a very highly skilled game. And I think that what turned people off about Power Up, and the reason it doesn't exist anymore, is that it was originally kind of designed to sort of appeal to people that also like to game, adults that enjoy Magic the Gathering, adults that enjoy playing Hearthstone and stuff like that. And then ultimately, I think when it landed in the poker sort of sphere, there's a lot of people in poker that really like poker and they hate change. And I would say, generally speaking, people hate change, but poker players in particular don't like change. So a lot of people might give it a go one time. They got absolutely annihilated, but they couldn't follow what the action was. They didn't really understand why they were losing, or, why is the duck deck being shuffled? Why is this guy looking at the top three cards? Why did that river just disappear off the board? All this kind of stuff. I felt like we might have needed to go one step further to educate people on how it works, but then ultimately people just kind of wanted to stick to what they know. There were so many elements of Power Up that one change would have been incredible. Like if you recall, Swap Hold'em. Did you ever play Swap? Do you remember that?
Swap, yeah. I remember we played a few times together actually in
Yeah.
Swap. Yeah. I actually really
So
enjoyed that.
Swap Hold'em, in my opinion, that's a good example of like one of the elements that could have been in Power Up, but instead of having just that one change, it had all these other changes. So it was really it sort of it was a bit overstimulating for some people.
Yeah.
There was too much of a learning curve, but basically just changing that one element made what was a really generic game like Texas Hold'em into something completely different, and actually in my opinion was one of the best sort of morph games that PokerStars did during that time. But to answer your question, yes, it was highly skilled, and some of the best players had like a 20%, 30% ROI, in these games or something, which when you imagine it was basically it was basically a spin and go without the spin. It was three-handed winner take all sit and go is the best way to describe it.
Right.
And they were relatively quick to play. Having a 20%, 30% ROI in any sit and go sort of around that time was unheard of, so it really was a super, super specialized but profitable game for that reason.
So then did that kind of just like slowly kind of go in terms of the demand, and then were you playing spin and goes as well as this at the time,
Yeah,
or
yeah, absolutely. So again, this timeline is kind of bouncing around, but I was playing spins and heads up sort of full time, and then we started streaming and playing Power Up. But all along in the background, we were playing, we were still playing heads up and spins and all
yeah.
that kind of stuff. And then yeah, basically what ended up happening was that the sort of interest in Power Up faded. It just wasn't, it was taking up a lot of space in the PokerStars client where people weren't as engaged. And then also what ended up happening was it was like myself, James, and then like 5 other members of our community that we created that people actually knew us for, that were all playing each other all day long because we were just too good. And
Yeah.
it wasn't allowing for other people to come and enjoy the game as a beginner because it was just a little bit too challenging. And I guess at that point we had really figured out a lot of the mechanics of the game.
So then spin and goes. Spin and goes are still around now. Spin and goes. Would you still say? I know you do play tournaments a lot more now, but would you still
Yeah.
say spin and goes are just your bread and butter?
So what I would say is that I do consider myself a professional poker player. However, these days I really focus on the content creation side of things, and I know you'll identify with this as well. I know you still put in a lot of volume. I would say that my focus now, if I'm talking about playing poker for profit, tend to be the games that I know that I can get enough volume in. So for me to say I'm still playing spin and goes professionally is probably completely false. I'm just not playing anywhere near enough enough volume required to sort of get past and accomplish like targets. So if I say back in the day when I was playing full time, we were playing 200, 300 games a day. You know what I mean? Heads up hypers or spins, which are very similar in their mechanics. And so to compare that to what I'm doing now, the majority of spins that I play are on stream. So even though I'm still playing it at a high level and I'm still beating the games that I'm taking part in, I don't think I could call that my bread and butter anymore. I would say that now, aside from the content creation and the games that I play on stream, I would say that my focus is probably now in tournaments and getting better at tournaments, even though I'm still learning in that aspect, and then playing cash and sit and goes as well. I still enjoy playing heads up hypers as well, which again is sort of the same as a spin, obviously, with one less player, but also without the variance associated with the multiplier, right? You're just
Right.
playing 2 players buy in, and you know what you're going to win every single time. And that's something that I'm focusing on this year as well.
Yeah, because then obviously what you do now is like you said, content creation. I was the same where like I think I over Christmas and well recently I've been asked. I constantly got asked like, what do you want to be more, content creator or poker player? Like, and I was like, I try and kind of do both. I'm gonna try and get as good as both as possible. But then if I was honest with myself, I was like, I don't think I can get to the top in both at the same time. And I don't
Yeah.
think a lot of people have. And this is why, full respect to the people, the
Yeah.
likes of Lex, that have got to such a high standard in
Yeah.
playing tournaments as well as such a high standard in content creation, right?
Yeah.
But I think that if I want a normal life outside of poker as well, I was honest with myself and I was like, I can't do both. So I think now I still want to, I'm still studying poker. I've still got a coach. I still want to get as good as poker as possible, but my aim is then now transitions from becoming like one of the best poker players in the world online to then
Yeah.
just becoming like the number one, like one of the best, obviously poker content creators. Like, did you kind of had to ask yourself that same question at some point?
Yeah, and this is actually super interesting to discuss because I think a lot of people that say like, how do I make it in poker? There's lots of ways to make it in poker. I think being an ambassador is one of them. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best poker player in the world either. If you're adding value to the community, that could be, for example, but my very good friend Carrie Jane has never been a professional poker player. She's a great poker player, mind you, but she is the director of poker at the Hippodrome Casino, and so her contributions to the poker sphere are just huge. She's putting on events there in London. She helped us host the Women's Festival last year. She's putting on a festival at the end of this month as well, which is another PokerStars Winter Festival that we're going to do. But her contributions to poker make her a fantastic ambassador, and her personality makes her a fantastic ambassador. But going back to what you're asking regarding the content creation, this is super interesting because I remember when Espen was sponsored by Unibet, and he literally left. And I remember him saying outright, I can't become as good as I want to be and continue to be an ambassador. And obviously, he's gone on to be one of the most omega super crushers, World Series of Poker champion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I've
His
got a little
accolades
funny
are
story
endless.
about that as well. Yeah.
And yeah, and yeah, of course, we've interacted with Espen here and there as well. But
Yeah.
he's a great example of somebody that leaned into being the best in that field. So going to your question, do I feel like I had to make a choice? I feel like I enjoy the content creation more than I was enjoying the sort of rise to the top sort of aspect of things. However, if you are considering a career becoming something like an ambassador, I think that tournaments actually do have that benefit in the sense that if you're on stream a lot and you're playing tournaments on stream a lot, you're actually getting through the kind of volume that you're required to do if you were playing off stream as well. Whereas like my spin and go streams, I usually play one table at a time because the action is so fast paced. It means I'm coaching people to become better at poker holistically. However, I couldn't sit there in one table spins and call myself a professional because you just got to play so much more volume in order to beat the variance.
Mm.
But yeah, it's interesting. It's really difficult to find a balance sometimes. And
I was gonna say that the balance, because like from like struggled to get the balance, but I'm just thinking of you now. So now you're doing commentating, streaming. At one point, I know this is what I was gonna ask you. You would obviously, yeah, like you said, you were doing spin and goes, just do one table and to then
yeah,
coach people. Because I know then you had like your spin and go coaches,
right.
like you were coaching people, right? And you were creating stuff from that. So like, did you? First question, like, how did you manage to balance all that, or how do you still manage to balance all that out? And second question, did you ever feel burn out from that, or trying to like juggle everything together?
So so how did I find the balance? I guess I didn't really, and I'm a bit of a workaholic in the sense that I like you and I both identify with being ambassadors and being professional players in the sense that it's our like whole identity, right? Like in the I remember how excited we were when we sort of were coming up, So for me, it's not really a hard trade-off to say that there's no balance because really I'm kind of all in that regard. But something had to give, and I think probably the actual volume was what gave in order to allow me to be a better ambassador and to coach people and to create more content. And then feeding into your second question, excuse me, feeding into your second question, have I ever suffered burnout? I do feel like I've started to feel burnout at the times when I've worked the hardest. So I think last year is a perfect example of that. As you said, I stream on Twitch when we're not traveling. And then when we do travel for European Poker Tour, I do commentary with James and Joe for the cards up commentary that we do there. We started to introduce UKIPT cards up commentary, so I did that last year as well. Last year, I completed a spin and go beginner's course for PokerStars Learn, which ended up being a huge piece of content. Um, as well as that, I still do tutorials and stuff like that for PokerStars. I do some coaching on the side as well. And basically, it was just adding up and adding up. I mean, there were months where I would leave on the first of the month and I wouldn't get back till the 30th. And then that day I would go back into streaming. I think in November of last year, I left on the 5th. I returned on the 30th, immediately did a 9-hour stream for BSOP, and then did the same on Wednesday and Thursday of that month as well. So the burnout exists, but when you're talking about and you're doing something that you love, I think it's very easy to recover and bounce back as long as you're looking after yourself, which is hopefully something I'm going to do more of this year in the sort of fitness sense.
Yeah, we can get into that, because
Yeah.
that's something that I've tried to get better at the last couple of years. Just going back on spin and goes, people that are watching this that want to get better at spin and goes, you say you've got a tutorial on PokerStars.
Yeah.
Is it PokerStars School?
So it's on PokerStars Learn. That's PokerStars School is
Yeah,
rebranded as PokerStars Learn, but I have a
right.
completely free spinning. It's actually in the course material. So there's the tab that says courses. You can go down to Spin and Go. That was a revamp of a course that we put together when we were still OP Poker. And when I say that this should have been a BBZ bundle, I'm not exaggerating because it started life as a BBZ bundle. It's something that I was putting together to hopefully collaborate with, with somebody like that. And if you want a very, very good free startup, I would definitely go and check it out because I've included material in there that probably should have ended up in paid material, but it's completely free on PokerStars Learn, so you definitely can start there. And then if you're talking about taking spin seriously, I mentioned this in the course as well. Preflop is so excruciatingly important. I've actually put together a series of preflop spin and go charts, which I sell on my website, which are basically one download, lifetime access, and you can go on my Discord and ask people there who have purchased it. It's some of the best spin and go material in the world, if not the best spin and go preflop material you can get. And it's everything you'll ever need, for spins. Basically, you won't ever need another resource from a preflop standpoint.
I would say when people come to me, and this is the one question, and actually, like I've got an idea for a form of bundle as well, because there's
Yeah,
the one question I get asked most from people is like, how do I study poker? How do I get better at poker? There's all it's kind of, and I've felt the same. It's so overwhelming. There's so many courses out
yeah,
there. Like obviously with spin and goes, I was already going to say that whether you do the best spin and go content in terms of getting better. Now you've produced that's free, which is crazy. But I always say, like, the best, easiest and best way and the cheapest is get better at pre-flop. Pre-flop is tournaments, obviously spin and goes as well. Probably like 80-90% of what you play is pre-flop. How to get better at pre-flop: when you're playing, tag hands or screenshot hands, and then you still see the likes of a
Yep.
pads do this to this day. He's one of
Oh,
the best players
all
in
day
the
long.
world.
All day long. Yeah.
Tag the hands either after your session. I prefer, and again, it's personal preference. I know a pads will end a session and he'll just sit there and go through all his hands. I personally can't do that because I'm so fatigued and tired. I'll wake up early the next day, and either before my session or on my day off, I'll go through my tagged hands. Go through your tagged hands. You'll then get a gist of what you need to fully concentrate on. Be honest with yourself of what you're uncomfortable with pre-flop, and then you can use, I don't know, a trainer, any of one of them trainers out there, to then drill the pre-flop spots.
Yeah.
Like, is that what you kind of recommend? Because obviously you said you've got access in that bundle you've done for pre-flop charts, but I think the problem is, which you could probably agree as well, when you kind of teach students, is they get very overwhelmed on how,
Yeah.
and this is what I did, how the
Yeah.
hell am I going to memorize all of these pre-flop charts?
Yeah, yeah, no, I absolutely agree. It is overwhelming. I think, as you said, I think starting to take notes in situations where you feel uncomfortable is a great beginner. And then I would go one step before, after that. I would say, sort of categorize them as to like what the issue is, right? So if you're going, man, I just feel like when I'm in the small blind, I always feel like don't know what I'm doing here. So if you're tagging loads of spots from the same position, like you said, you know what to drill specifically, so you can focus on just that material to begin with. However, having said that, as we mentioned already, there are so many spots where people are just like, yeah, of course I know what I'm doing in this situation, but they're still getting it wrong. So
Yeah.
I don't know
I
what
think
the
that's
trick
where, for
is.
me, I think that's where the coach then comes in.
Yeah.
Because then obviously, like, I'm really bad at looking at numbers and going through like Poker Tracker and being like, whereas that's for me is like when then I have Jordan BBZ, like he'll then go in and go,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
actually
Yeah. Yeah.
think him, for most of the time that happens, he'll be like, you need to improve on this spot. And most of the time, 99% of the time, I'm like, yes, I feel uncomfortable in these spots,
Yep.
but
Yep. Yep.
I definitely do see the value in a coach. And then, because that's the worst mistake. That's the worst problem, right? If you
Right.
think you're good in a spot
That's
and you're
exactly
actually
it.
losing a lot,
This is,
that's where
and this,
then the coach comes in.
exactly, and this goes back to my story about, I got better, much better. Got better much faster when I had a coach, and that's because there were loads of things I was doing that I just assumed were good and they were bad. So it's it's false economy to assume that you can just figure it out on your own, even if you do have access to these materials. Like if you have access to GTO Base or GTO Wizard or whatever, it's so overwhelming that you don't know where to look to start. It's almost worth getting a coach to go, hey, if I just pay you like $100, can you just like watch my session on fast forward and just tell me what I'm doing wrong? And they go, oh man, you're too loose from the button, you're too loose from under the gun, you're not three betting enough. And you go, okay, cool, I can focus on those things, and then you can target those things in in trainers, and similar. But then also, if you want to improve your post flop, the realization that post flop is basically completely dictated by pre-flop is something that
Yeah.
just absolutely blew my mind, and it took me ages to
Yeah.
figure out. Also, even if you're not interested in spins, if you go to that free course that I'm talking about on PokerStars Learn, and you go to the post flop section, what I accidentally ended up making was basically a tutorial on how to play post flop in any situation in any format. So if you wanted to check that out, go give that a look if you're struggling to figure out how to get better at reading your post flop situations. And
If you're
because
watching
really,
this on, to be fair, I think I could use the link, leave the link in Spotify as well.
right.
But yeah, in the descriptions, I'll leave the link to that because, like you said, if it's
Yeah.
free and even like the bundles, I always recommend, because I used the Ape Stars one before I went pro, and that was like $99 at the time. It's just so much value, even in
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
price
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
But with the fact that you've done it for free is unbelievable.
Yeah, and like I said, guys, like just go. Basically, I set off to do the. I didn't know how I wanted to do the post flop section. I ended up just explaining like the entire ethos of post flop, which is basically have a system where you think about their range pre flop. Why is it like that? What's the effective stack depth? What position are they in? What does that range look like? What does my range look like? How do the two interact with each other? How do they interact with flop textures? Yada 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 yada. And just it's sort of a process that might actually help you get there faster if you wanted to check it out.
And if people wanted to, do you do like private coaching, one-on-one coaching? And like you said
So
about reach out to a coach and they'll go over your stats or whatever, or you do you offer anything like that for people?
Here's what I tend to say when people ask me about this. I do private coaching for sort of friends and stuff. However, because I am so busy with my work as an ambassador, I tend to like, I mean, the actual expense of being like, right, Nick, I want you on your own for 5 hours every week is probably more expensive than it should be, because I probably price it that way because I just can't accept it really in the reality.
Yeah.
Not because I think I'm the biggest genius in the world or anything like that, because that's just not the case. But what I will say is that part of my job as an ambassador is to have a community, and my community lives on Discord in a place where you can get free advice from me all the time. So tons of people have gone, Nick, can I really want to pay you for one-to-one coaching. I'm like, just don't bother. Just go drop it in the Discord. Everybody who's on there can benefit from your question and learn from your question. I'll do it for free. I'm not precious about that kind of thing. And the number of people on my Discord who are grinding their bankrolls up from micro stakes, like starting from a place where they had know nothing about spin and goes. They got the pre-flop material from my website. They've watched the course. They've asked me questions. They've sent me hands. I've responded. I've got, probably 10, at least 10 users who went from, slightly losing to now winning players in the spin and go arena that I know about, because there's tons of other people who have bought the material that I don't know as well. But what I would say is, if you're looking for help, come talk to me. I'm always available. Ask anybody that I work with. I'm always on my phone. I'm always willing to help for free. I'm not going to be precious about that kind of stuff. So just come and ask a question on stream, ask a question on Discord. Use me for the resource that I'm supposed to be. That's what PokerStars pays us for.
Yeah. And then I just thinking about it now, like spinning goes is such a really good way of kind of getting into poker and getting better and making a little bit of money on the side, because they're so quick. You can obviously do a 9 to 5 job, let's say, and then you can
Yep.
play it on an evening. Because that was the issue with tournaments for me, was like when I first started streaming, and this is what people don't see for the first year. I was doing 9 to 5 job and then having a little nap and then streaming 6 till
Right.
it depended on when the tournaments went on till. So like sometimes 3, 4 in the morning, then getting up
Yeah.
for work at 9. So at least people can be like, right, I can play spins for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then I can finish at this time, so I can still get to bed
Yeah.
at a reasonable time. Do
Yeah.
you think it's a good, like, because you said before about like it just is, people in general just do have a negative mindset of things like spins aren't profitable, blah blah blah, cash isn't profitable, online cash. So you know, and you do think that spins are profitable online still for people?
Oh yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
look, guys. Let me just make this crystal clear. Spins are absolutely and always have been profitable, and there's no they might be less profitable than they were before because people are really good at them now. But why do you
yeah,
think people improve? Why would people invest time to become better at this thing where they're just dumping money? It's just not the case. There are so many people playing spin and goes professionally. It is a highly skilled format. It is actually very nuanced as well. A lot of people coming from an MTT background have just dismissed them outright. They're like, it's a turbo, it's just nonsense, we're just gambling, it's just bingo. It's just not true, and we have the graphs to prove it. We have the evidence, we have scientific evidence to prove that that's the fact. And that's still true today. But what I would say to people in general is, spinning goes don't have to be your thing. I'm not here to sell you spinning goes. I was playing spinning goes before I was an ambassador. That's also a bit of a misconception. But I can guarantee you that if you want to be a better poker player, whether that be cash game or tournaments, more for tournaments, obviously the cash thing is a little bit more meta, but if you play spin and goes and you learn to play them well, you will become a better poker player, even if you hate spins, even if you don't want to play spins, even if MTTs are your jam. Learning how to play the small blind extremely well, 25 big blinds or less, or 30 big blinds and less, is probably something that all of us need to know if we want to be good at tournaments. Full stop. Learning how to
yeah,
defend your big blind correctly versus the button or for the small blind, also completely crucial. And then people say, well, yeah, but at those stack depths, it's just push fold. That's why it's so shallow. That's also not true. There's like
mm,
lots of things that people assume are the case that aren't the case. So if you want to become a short stack ninja, if you want to sort of drill and learn your small blind and your big blind defense ranges and your button opening ranges at 30 big blinds or less, spinning goes are a great way to practice that. And there's probably 6 people right now who are world-class super crushers in the MTT field that started off playing spinning goes, and it was that start that made them so good to give them a leg up to move into MTTs. They didn't start there. They didn't start in MTTs and then tried spins. They started in spins and then moved to MTTs. So give it a go. Don't sort of throw it out the window. And also, like you say, they're accessible in the sense that you can play them as and when you want really quickly and just get a little bit of practice in here and there if you're doing a 9 to 5 job.
Yeah, and you just said then about like 6 of the top poker players in the world came from spins. That's what I was going to ask you. Like, how have you found the transition from then learning and playing more tournaments from spin and goes?
So I am still, in my opinion, early in my MTT journey. Am I a winning player? Yes. Am I probably above average at MTTs? Well, I'd like to think so, especially given the fact that I do commentary about it. But I am nowhere near the level of the other PokerStars ambassadors who have mained MTTs. I'm still learning in that sense. But that's also because I'm being honest with myself regarding how much time I put into becoming good at sit and goes as well. When I think about how much time and effort I've put into sort of trying to master every aspect of my discipline, I just think I've still got another 10,000 hours associated with MTTs. And actually, what ended up happening, Lucas, is I became an ambassador. And of course, the question you always get is like, what's your biggest score? And I'm like, let me show you a graph where I'm like absolutely annihilating people over 200,000 spinning goes or something. And they're like, sure. That's great. But like, what's your biggest score? So the push to play more MTTs was always there, but my content was still always focused on sit and goes. So really, I don't want to call it a transition, but it's something that I need to get into more often, and I'd like to improve on. But I think at some point I just need to completely sort of cast off everything else and just focus on MTTs if I want to get to the level of some of our heroes.
Does that excite you?
It does excite me, and actually, I enjoy MTTs a lot more now than I did before. There is nothing quite like winning an MTT in poker. It's very, very special. I really like cash. I've always kind of hated on MTTs. I'm always I'm always taking the piss out of people for like, oh yeah, cool, you're just a DGen, or like oh, tournament poker sucks. But there is something special about tournaments, and also there would be no poker industry without tournament poker. It's what gets people excited. And I am excited about learning more. And I think in the next couple of years, I hopefully will have the opportunity to work with people and get some real coaching and improve in that field, and potentially end up on TV one day.
So why you've literally just asked then, Nick, what is your biggest score? What is your biggest score then in a tournament today?
So to answer two questions in one, the biggest spin and go that I've ever seen was a $150,000 spin and go from a $15 buy-in. Unfortunately, did not win that one, but still took home $15K. My biggest ever score online, I think, is 27.5K, something like that. I think it was 27.5. That was my deep run in the Sunday Million anniversary last year or the year before. Can't remember which year it was. I came 16th. First place was $1 million. So I was pretty close to the $1 million. That would have been really special for me, but that was still pretty big. I think my biggest score live, oh man, don't even quote me on this. I'm not sure. It's like less than 20K. I just don't have the MTT results. And you'll understand, Lucas, as well. Being an ambassador, it's almost like I just want to get like over 200K on Handed Mob just so I can be like, all right, you can shut up now, haters. I actually have some scores. But ultimately, to be true to myself,
if you don't play much, then
I just don't play them.
I'm
If anything, the scores that I have are an indication of a good ROI, because I just don't play any volume at all. So to have any scores, I guess, is pretty good. But we'll get there. I'm going to invest a lot more time in tournaments, and hopefully I'll have a more rounded repertoire in the future. But if you guys need any proof of my actual results in the games that I play, go check out my Instagram. I've got some graphs there, and I'd like to imagine I'm pretty good at those. So.
What's the biggest? You said 150K was the biggest spin kind of jackpot that you played in and didn't win that. What's the biggest one you've seen in the community?
I think I knew somebody who had a 100K score, but it might have been at different stakes, because I hit the 150K at the $15 stake. So it was the absolute omega peak, like never happens. Like,
were you streaming this or just playing all off stream?
This was before I was an ambassador.
I
have screenshots of it, which you can see on the if you find the right command on our Twitch channel. But the biggest one that I ever did on stream was 6K. And I think that was 6K at 60s. I was playing $60 buy-ins, which to this day, we've spoken about this one, Lucas, to this day is my most viewed YouTube video or appearance. And the level of hatred and negativity in that YouTube chat to this day just scars me, man. It's absolutely brutal. Ultimately, it came down to a situation where I think we were 5 or 6 big blinds effective, and I shoved King 5 offsuit. The internet has never witnessed this before in the history of poker. Why would you go all in with King 5 offsuit, Nick? You absolute whale. What are you thinking? Can you believe it? But yeah, obviously it's the right.
But you're the most genius poker player if you would have won that. and then
Well,
won
yeah,
the money.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, yeah, just put on, you applied the pressure at the right times and all this other stuff. But yeah, that's a funny one to go back. I remember somebody in that YouTube chat wrote me an essay, like paragraphs and paragraphs about how I should consider just giving it all up. And like, probably I'd do better if I went to the Greyhounds, and like horses might be my game. And his wife has been playing for 6 months and she's 10 times the player I am. And it was one of those really funny encounters, and probably the most negativity I've ever received in my entire career as a sort of public figure.
That was good. The way you say it is like it's funny, and that's the way I see it now. And I remember like because my brother was doing editing for me at the time, and I remember at this point I was pretty new into it all, and I was like, I just really took it to heart every negative comment. I was like, I just don't understand why people are so negative. And like, I just try and be a good person, right? I just try and be positive. Like,
Yeah.
I'm really proud of the community I built. I'm sure you're probably the same. Where that's why we're good mates. We're both similar. Where we just try and be good ambassadors. We try and be good people, right? And I just couldn't comprehend, like, and it just used to really upset me. And my brother turned around to me, and my brother's 7 years younger than me, right? But it was so true. And he just goes, Lucas, they are making you more money by commenting on your stuff.
Yeah, I
And that
haven't
literally stuck to me to this day. I'm like, oh
I,
my goodness. Like
I
prime example
haven't
the other
looked.
day.
Let me see if I can find it. I wonder how many views that one has now. It's probably gone up. 6K spin and go, Nick Walsh. Let me see. Sorry to interrupt. I want to see if I can
No,
actually
don't
find
worry.
it here. Here it is. All right, cool. Yeah. So for the sake of for the sake of completeness, let me tell you where we're at here. So it was a 125x multiplier at the $40 stakes. Excuse me, it was a $6,000 for first place, and that video has nearly 250,000 views as of the 28th of the first 2025. So this also plays into some of my suspicions regarding poker content. And actually, I'll talk. I want to talk more about my challenge that I'm doing in 2025. But sometimes it's almost better to open yourself up to all forms of abuse, because the actual feedback and the actual views that you get for negativity are almost better than the ones for the good ones. So just be honest with yourself. Just be open. Share your true journey. Don't feel ashamed, because also people that don't feel ashamed by poker, I think, are more open to the idea that they're going to play better in the future. And I think they're more open to the idea that they can get better because they can learn from their mistakes. If you leave
Yeah.
the casino and you go, I am so unlucky, I literally never win anything, John is always hitting the cards he needs to hit, why is he always beating me? You're not opening yourself up to the opportunity to learn and to think that actually there was something I could have done that might have changed the outcome for the better.
Well, we know, yeah, everyone knows them poker players that all they
Yeah.
do is say tell bad beats. They think they're the unluckiest person in the world, and then it's like you just review one of their hands, and it's like they've played the hands like not good, but in their minds it's like, no, I played it perfectly. I just got
Yeah.
unlucky,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
thing about poker. That's why, like I always say, poker's the only sport you could say that non-professionals want to pay money to play against professionals because there's ego involved,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there's that luck element. But because there's ego, it
Yeah.
is just ego.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think like a lot of people get really funny about like, oh, don't tell me your bad beat stories. Like, it's not so much that. Like, I actually don't mind listening to
Yeah.
bad beat stories, as long as it's not a bad beat story that's associated with like you complaining about your bad play. You know what I mean? Like, and when they tell you the bad beat story and you're like, you probably shouldn't have 3-bet that, or like, oh, why are you calling pre-flop? That's when it's frustrating. But but not because I'm sick and tired of hearing this person talk about it, but more just like, I would rather see them succeed and be happy, and I think that requires a certain amount of self-awareness that they obviously don't have at this stage in their career.
So how long did it take you to? Because at first, obviously, when you start getting a bit of, they always say, like, I don't know again the quote, but like when you start getting hate is when you're starting to become successful. When people, and I realize now it is just jealousy. It is, and I kind of feel sorry for people in a way, because obviously, like, I've never personally thought about leaving a negative comment on anyone's post. Never mind leaving it.
Mm.
But obviously, for a person to be in that situation and to do that, like they obviously are in a pretty bad way in their life, right? So I kind of do feel sorry. And if someone comes in the stream and obviously remove the comment or whatever, I always say, listen, just get help, man. Like you're not going to live a good, positive life and come into his person's stream and just leaving a negative comment when all we're doing is sat here just playing a game for a living and just having a laugh, right?
Yeah.
And just we're not taking life too seriously. So like, how long did it take for you to kind of get used to kind of them negative comments?
I'm gonna I have to say, or I have to admit that I don't know how I've done it or how I've managed it or what it is about sort of what I make, but I have a very overwhelmingly positive response to most of what I've ever created. Now, that was a very specific one, and it got seen by a lot of people that just don't play poker. So it's really confusing to them. Most of the negativity was surrounding, like that shove with the king five or something like that. Or, I think I made a really big fold with a pocket pair, which even on reflection now in 2025, I still think is the right move, even to this day. Um, I would say that I haven't encountered that much of it, but when I do encounter it, I kind of have the same mentality as you, May. I just think it's not so much that I feel sorry for them. I just realize that so much of what they're saying is based in ignorance. You know what I mean? Like there's so much the fact that they want to comment in the first place on a hand that I know that is 100% correct already indicates they don't know what they're talking about. But then on top of that, it's also the case that I think that they are just showing that they're probably going to be unwilling to allow themselves to win in the future. And that's an interesting way to phrase it, right? Because I have friends who I play poker with, and I'm like, you're not letting yourself get better. You're not allowing yourself to imagine that you're bad enough that you could be better. And that's the first step in getting better at something is realizing that you're not very good. It's like the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Like the less people know about something, is that the right way around? The less the people know about something, the more confident they feel about the topic, and then vice versa. The opposite of that is imposter syndrome, when you're so qualified for something that you realize that you just like haven't even scratched the surface of a topic. I'd rather live in that era. I'd rather be Mr. Imposter Syndrome, and feel like I'm always striving to be better and investing more in the people and helping people that I work with and stuff, than be the guy who's just like, I've played like 8 times poker. I know what I'm talking about. This guy sucks. I looked at those ranges. They're stupid anyway. Trust me, like whatever he's doing is wrong. Is just a really sad way to live your life. And I think we should try and do away with negativity and try and put a better foot forward, I suppose.
That's why I said though there'll always be money in poker because of egos. Because like you said before, where like you can prove like with science that you can be profitable and spinning goes right.
Yeah.
And I always say like there's people that think the earth is flat and like they're given evidence, they're given literally scientific evidence, but they still just don't believe. So like that's why there'll always be something in
If anything, I'm kind of jealous of that, mate. I would rather, I like they say ignorance is bliss, and like there's loads of situations where I've just been like blissfully unaware of something, and then I'm like, oh man, I wish I didn't know that now.
yeah, that is a good thing in certain things in life, but in poker, yeah,
Not in
it's
poker. No, not in
yeah, it's
poker.
make
Yeah,
money
you're
in.
right. Yeah.
So then, so because we're thinking about that now in terms of the opening yourself up, you said that video got 250,000 views. I can imagine then it was quite overwhelming, or I mean, obviously speaking for you, but like, how was it then when you done your first bit of commentary? Because now, obviously, this is a main thing of what you do for a living, right?
Yeah.
Commentating on big events like EPTs.
Yeah.
How did that start? And then kind of like, what was that like when you're starting to get into that?
Good question. So at that point, I've been with Stars for a couple of years. I was doing streaming, just like almost strictly, completely on Twitch of my own content. That was Power Up or Spinning Goes or whatever we were on at the time. And then I was invited to come along to give. No, that's not even it. That's not what happened. So then what ended up happening was I went to Prague to visit Prague, and I was visiting Prague around the same time as the EPT because I wanted to sort of surround myself and embed myself in that, and also have lots of friends that work in that environment as well. And so I sort of took it upon myself to be there, even though I wasn't actually invited to be there for commentary specifically. So I was floating around, and I was sort of just like talking to people, and like I was there as an ambassador, but obviously I was just there sort of on holiday more than anything else. I wasn't expected to do anything. And I basically was I put myself forward, or I was asked to basically participate in a commentary gig because they were looking for people to do comms. And I jumped on commentary and I did my first session, and I think it went really well. And then the rest is kind of history. They were like, we really like Nick, we liked his voice. I'm positioned also uniquely in a way where I'm always sort of available for this stuff that other people aren't available for because they're actually playing. So
Yeah.
not being the MTT guy in this case actually really helped me, because I wasn't like, there's no way I'm missing the main event, guys. There's no way I'm missing the high roller, all this other stuff. I was always available. fluent enough to talk about poker, communicate well enough to actually talk about it, with the likes of James and Joe, who I really idolize. I love those guys to death. And I just sort of put myself in that environment, and then they took me under their wing, and the rest was history. So it was invited back and ended up doing commentary thereafter. Yeah.
So what is that now kind of the thing that you're concentrating a lot on? Because obviously you still do stream, like you said, you still kind of do a bit of coaching through the spin and goes. Is that something that this year you're gonna do a lot more of, or like is that kind of your main priority now as an ambassador for PokerStars?
I would say commentary, live commentary and streaming are my two main sort of like, if Star said, what are we paying you for? I would say that my two and a half would be commentary, streaming, and then probably the half is also just community management. But I do that organically anyway. That's something that I always want to do throughout my life. So, I make content for the sort of live broadcast stuff. I make content for the Twitch channel when nothing else is going on, sort of during off weeks, as it were. And then I sort of run the community with the Discord channel and the Instagram and all the other stuff. However, this year in particular, I would like to focus on growing my social media presence as well. I feel like I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of years, investing in creating big content for stars, but I'd like to try and invest a little bit of time in growing my own presence and trying to get the sort of Nick Walsh TV brand a little bit more well recognized. Not because it's an ego thing. Honestly, I could care less. It's more because I make really good content with some amazing people, and I want more people to see it, and I want us to have a wider audience. And I think that was just kind of doing my part to allow, my posts on Instagram or whatever to draw more people into the stream so that they can enjoy poker, the way that it's broadcast and the way that we make it at PokerStars.
That's why I wanted to do this podcast, man. Obviously, I know to start, it's not going to get like many numbers, but if we can kind of like have my poker pals on, we can like grow together, collaborate together.
Yeah,
Like it's just kind of like a win-win situation type of thing.
I totally agree, mate. And I think that, again, going back to like, people are like, what can I do to become an ambassador? You need to find out, you need to figure out how you're going to add unique value to what you do. And that, again, that doesn't have to mean that you have to be the best player in the world. You could just be a really entertaining streamer, and that would be good enough. Or you could be somebody that runs grassroots poker events, in your local town, and it grows into something that's bigger, and now you're running like, small tours and stuff like that. You could be a great commentator. There's lots of ways to do it. I just think it's really important that you understand how you're adding value to the process, and put yourself in situations to get noticed and to succeed.
Quick question that's just come to my brain. What's the craziest hand you've commentated on live? Does any stick out?
Okay, so very recently, okay, I'll give you two of my favorites. Very recently, it was last year, EPT Paris, I believe. So it's the second time that we went to Paris. The two hands that stand out in my mind that I think are just some of the best ever. Del Foco, I think his name was. I think he was an Italian guy, if I'm not mistaken. I don't want to misquote. It was like the start of day something, and there was like 2 tables left. There was 18 players remaining or whatever. It was really early on in the day. It might have even been one of the first hands. He just open shoves 20 big blinds with 7 tray off and gets called by aces and just sits there stunned. And as a commentator, you have to kind of tell your story, and you have to weave a tale, and sometimes you have to be kind, and you have to sort of say, oh, I'm not really sure about this, but maybe he was thinking. It was one of those moments where there's just not really any real justification for it, and it was just so like, I'm not trying to make fun of this guy. I don't actually know what happened. I think there's a chance he might have actually like said all in when he didn't mean all in as well, because there was a language barrier. But that was one of the craziest hands ever, because there was such huge money up top. It's such a prestigious event, and it just felt like such a massive blunder for whatever reason, and that was insane. My other one from that same event, you'll remember this one as well, was Barney Boatman making the hero call with top pair against, I think his name is Eric Afriat. And Eric Afriat's going, Barney, how can you call? How can you call for your tournament life? I can't believe, like, what are you doing? It's your tournament life. It's your tournament life. And Barney just turns around and says, it's my tournament life, not my real life. And that was just, it's just absolute stream gold. And then Eric went on thereafter to actually use all of his time banks, because he wanted a time bank for 10 minutes to get to the end of the day, and he had a stack about that big. I think that was just some really, really good TV. I guess one
I
more
think
if
that
you
got
want.
nominated. I think that got nominated this year
Yeah,
for
it
one of
would
the
have done.
hands.
It would have
Yeah,
done. It
yeah.
was an epic one. If you want one more, I think it would be. I think it was Barcelona 2022. It was the winning hand. It was the moment that Bendinelli, aka Flexinelli, won Barcelona, and it went quads over boat for the final hand. And that was just the cherry on the top of what was already an insane final table. He comes back from one big blind to win the tournament, and that's the final hand. Like, just get out of town. It was just that whole thing. There were so many memorable moments from that specific EPT that I think that was probably one of my favorites of all time.
For me, growing up, it was like WSOP and EPT. Like they were the ones that I just loved watching, and that was on my bucket list to play. And I played my first EPT not last year, the year before. I think it was Cyprus, and like made a big stack to day two, and ended up busting before the bubble. And like the feeling was just like, oh my, this is the one of the worst feelings. But it was just the magic. And it was the same in the main. The first time I played the
Yeah.
WSOP main, bust before the money, it was horrendous. But it just that for me just lived up to the magic of them events, and I
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
can't. This year, I wanna get to more EPTs. I didn't get to one last year because I was just concentrating a lot more on live. Online. Last year was when we talk about balance. I struggled to get the balance last year.
Yeah.
But this year, I've kind of figured out where I can adding this podcast into it. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to do less, and then I want to do this. But this year for me was like, I want to do stuff like this. That I hate being one of these type of people that like I'll do this and never do it, right? And this for me, I've made so many poker pals, so many connections in poker where I want to just have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
I want to create content from that, and ideas from that, right? And collaborate with different just amazing people like yourself in poker. Um, but because I love it and because I've now got the better balance, I can actually do more this year. And like you said, when you love something, and this is what anyone watching this right now, and spoke about this briefly in the previous podcast, it's like if you are doing something in life that you really don't like, and I was the same before I got into poker, in a family business, and my family wanted me to like kind of take it over eventually and like be, you know what I mean, run it. And it wasn't for me. And like I think that was a thing back in the day, this very old school of like you grow up, you like
Mhm.
take over the family business. You kind of do. I know obviously there's a lot of people that like the mum and dad wanted to become a doctor, or like you kind of got to do what your parents say or whatever, or your family.
Yeah.
But nowadays it's like now you can go and live in Thailand. Like you get so many people living in all these countries. Like I'm on a digital nomad visa. Like so many countries have got digital nomad visas where you can
Mhm.
just go for a year, work online. Obviously, from after COVID, people are kind of working a lot more online rather than going in the office. And I would, anyone that not just listening that doesn't just want to get into poker, but that just wants to do something with their life, or they've got an idea or a goal.
Yeah.
Really like that guy who's on TikTok. I don't even know his name, but he just interviews people and goes, "What's your dream?" And
I
they're
like
like,
that. I
"Oh,
love that guy. Yeah. I watched that too.
yeah, like he and he was on a recent podcast. I watched the clip of him, and it was really, and this can correlate to both of us. He was asking this fitness influencer, Mike Thurston, who I've followed for years, and he asked him, he was like, when you first started off, did you start off by adding value into people's lives or adding value in your own life? And he was
Right.
like, I started YouTube from doing basically helping people in
Right.
fitness and stuff. And
That's
he was
always the
like,
way.
you should always start off by adding value into people's life. You're the same. You started off with obviously, yeah, with kind of spin and goes, heads up, like, and that's something that I in myself and in my gut, I really want to do. I do want to get into coaching eventually, not to make money, but to help people.
Yeah.
But this is why I think with the podcast, and I had to be honest with myself, like, what do I do want to do more of is help
Yeah.
people, and just put out content out there that can help people. And even if it's like not just helping people in different ways of like they may just watch this podcast and it may just make the day. Like it may get through, like I've gone through tough times in the past, and stuff like certain podcasts or certain YouTubers or certain videos has helped me through them kind of dark
Yeah.
times. So even if I can create this and it can help people through that.
Yeah, mate. No, and I think that's exactly it. Like, so almost everything that happened to me that was positive in a way that I felt like I was becoming the person that I wanted to be or doing the thing that I wanted to do with my life happened when I started to create things for other people. So like obviously, learning to be good at poker is I suppose I don't want to use the word selfish, but it's kind of a prerequisite for being a good poker player is learning to become better at the game. But it wasn't until I started to create content and to share it with other people that it became my career. And I think that's a really good example of just going all in and just being like, this is what I want to do. I think there's a lot to be said for that. And it was the connection with other people that made it something that was great, not me going, oh, if I get 500 viewers, maybe I can make, $50 this month or whatever the value is like that. Um, yeah, I mean, just me starting off on Twitch and streaming to 2 people for like months and being like,
That's what people don't see. The people
my
see you like
yeah,
sponsored by PokerStars, commentating on all EPTs, and like obviously people see me sponsored and stuff. It's like I was the same. I streamed for a year, like five
five
people
viewers,
watching.
five viewers, and my friends and family are like, bro, you're wasting your time. I'm like, no, 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 no. Like, trust me, we're doing something here. It's gonna be a thing. It's gonna be a thing. It's gonna be a thing. And obviously now, like, yesterday is Sunday Million stream, 1,300 viewers concurrent. It's a big leap. Those are
Mhm.
big, very different numbers these days.
What was that thing inside you that like trusted the process? Do you think
Oh
that was like to your
man.
family, like just trust me?
So actually, I would say that with all due respect to my mother, who I love very much, and she's a wonderful woman, and she tried to do everything right with me, despite what ended up happening here. Um, I would say that actually it was in some ways it was my family's determination to tell me that poker was something that you couldn't do professionally or you couldn't take seriously. That made me a bit of like, no, like I'm not making this up. This isn't just my pipe dream. This is a thing. People have done this. And actually, in many ways, it was that pushback that made me feel like I was going to make a real go of it. Regarding the streaming thing, I think it was just because I wanted to do something. I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to have my own business. I wanted to have my own thing to build. And when I started streaming, people were like, you seem really good at this. You seem like you can talk shit all day, which is what I do really well apparently. And as a prerequisite skill, I guess that was my calling, was just to yap all day, as I'm sure I have on this podcast. And yeah, the rest was history. I guess it was just something in the back of my mind, knowing that I wanted to do something different. Partially my family saying that it wasn't a reality that I could do this kind of thing professionally, and then also some X factor where I just knew. I was just like, that's crazy, but like I just feel like it's gonna happen. And then
Yeah.
ring, ring, ring. Hi, it's literally PokerStars, the literal company that we were literally targeting, and we want to have a conversation with you about working together. And it was just mind blowing stuff. But I think going back to what you're saying, I think that now more than ever there are opportunities for you to make something that you like to do your full time job. With the advent of social media and with content creation being such a big thing, even if you're not even that good in front of the camera, again, if you can add value, but you're the worst public speaker, how many people are out there like on the internet, like putting together watches in silence? They're like taking watches apart and restoring Rolexes and saying nothing at all. And it's their craft and their sort of attention to detail that is so engaging or something like that. Or how many people out there are doing like makeup tutorials in silence, or whatever it is. I don't know. Those are probably very saturated markets now, but you get what I'm
It's
saying.
just trying it. It's just trying it. Like if you wouldn't have like gone to Thailand, like if you would have been scared to go, like when like I was speaking to my fiance yesterday about this, and it's like when you say to people like, "Oh, you live in Malta," and it's such this like. I feel like it's just like narrow mindset, and I don't know if it's like specifically a UK thing or whatever. It's like, wow, you live in Malta, and it's like you can too. Like it's not you can go a digital nomad
Yeah,
visa now. Like
yeah,
like you don't. But like, oh, you're a professional poker player. It's like obviously being a professional poker player is a lot harder, right? And like it's
it's harder than moving to Malta. Yeah, definitely.
yeah, yeah, that's what I mean. And it's like, but like it's seen as this like alien thing, and it's like try it. Like anyone I speak to, it's like you're the same. Grew up in America, like moved to the UK, like now you're traveling around the world with the EPTs. Like you live one life, and obviously some people don't want to. Some people haven't even got a passport. We were speaking on stream yesterday. I was like, that blows my mind that some people haven't got a
Yeah,
passport. But like for me, you only live one life to kind of see the world and like do what you want to do in life. And I
yeah.
think, what would you recommend to people that we can go specific to poker, but are do have something that they want to do in a dream, but and they're doing like a job, kind of, let's say, like in the week 9 to 5 that they hate, but they do want to do something better, or they do want to create something, whether it's a YouTube channel, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a
Yeah.
hobby. How would you go around doing that? Because
So
it's so hard, I think,
it,
for
it
most
is.
people to
It
kind of
is.
get
It
over that
is.
barrier. Yeah.
It is, and also I don't want to, we're talking about it like it's so easy, like, but again, obviously we got really lucky in many senses too. But I think also the thing that people don't realize is we got lucky because we put ourselves in situations to get lucky. It's the same as poker, right? If you put yourself in good situations, often good things will happen, in the long run. But how would I suggest they get into that? So first of all, I would ask yourself this very important question, which a lot of people don't. Is this thing that I love, is my hobby, is this thing that I really enjoy doing something that I want to make my job? Because there's also it will also become your job, and you will also
Yeah.
be like, man, I really wish this EPT would finish, or like, man,
Yeah.
or man, I really
That's
don't
what
want to
people
stream.
don't realize, and this is, I think, we can speak about this.
Yeah.
This has become a job, and it got to a point last year where I was like, oh shit, I don't have any hobbies anymore. Poker is my main hobby. I need to get other
Exactly.
hobbies, and I think that's
Exactly.
important because
Exactly.
it does become your job, and it's so hard to comprehend. Even though this is the best job I
Yeah.
could ever wish for, it
Yeah.
does become a job.
Yeah. But okay, let's assume that this is definitely what you want to do, but do consider that first bit. Okay, so let's say John wants to become a professional. He loves tennis. He just likes tennis in general, right?
Wants
First
to
of all,
become
I
a
would.
tennis content creator because he sees, like,
Well, right.
he
Okay,
he
he
follows this
loves to
tennis
play.
YouTuber,
Yeah,
and he loves it.
exactly right. He loves to play, but he knows he might not be a pro or whatever. It doesn't matter what the situation is. I would look at what other content is being created right now, and I would go, I like this, I like this, I like this, and I would start making lists. I would start making mind maps, even, because I think that's a really good tool. And there's lots of digital mind maps you can use now. There's a program called MindMeister, which is amazing for bubbling stuff. But I would say, what's all the content? Let's look at 100% of the content. What's the stuff that I enjoy? Ask yourself why you enjoy it. Ask yourself, the people that make this, what are they doing that's different, and why do I enjoy what they do? And then ask yourself, is that something that I could accomplish or add to, or create myself? So I really like that. I really like when people are reacting to tennis content. Could I make React content? How could I elevate that React content? Like, could I make it a stream? Could it be something that we do live? Can I react in real time to something that's happening? And then I can gamify it, and I can work with my audience to do giveaways, or maybe I'll make merch associated with the content that I create. Maybe that's the way that I sort of monetize what I'm doing, because I'm doing something that I love passionately, where I'm giving back to the community. But the way that they show their support is that they buy my stuff, and something like that. And I think it's basically just about narrowing down the essence of what you want to do and why it's successful, and then see how you can make it your own and how you can add value. Again, I keep saying that, keep coming back to that phrase, adding value. Like, people go, hey Nick, I actually stream on Twitch. Do you think I could become an ambassador? I'm like, absolutely, yes, you can. Let me take a look at what you're doing. Okay, well, you're just copying Spraggy, you're just copying
Yeah.
Lex, you're just copying me, you're just or you're only streaming like once a week or once a month. I'm like, that's not going to do it, buddy. You're like, how are you taking something and elevating it and making it your own? You can copy someone, but you have to bring some semblance of yourself and be honest with yourself and be vulnerable and actually give some part of yourself to your audience in order to make it successful, or invent something completely new that nobody's ever seen, which again is probably the harder of the two paths. But that might happen organically once you start copying people, right? So
Yeah. And even if it's,
I
I'd even go a step further. Even if it's like, because that's what I'm bringing, my ideas that I want to do, are actually things that are successful in other industries that I quite like the idea of. That I'm like, interesting. Like, how can that correlate to poker? And like, would that work in poker? I think it might be, but I'll try it, and it
sure,
may not
sure.
work in poker. Yeah.
Yeah, a really good example was one of our producers who I talked to a lot. He sort of said, like shoutcasters. When you're watching League of Legends and stuff, they call their presenters shoutcasters. That's how the term was coined. And they go, have you ever seen like these shoutcasters like react videos? You know what I mean? Where like they're actually watching the event at the same time as the event happening. They're not broadcasting that because your audience is already watching that event, and then they just have that on in the background. And they're reacting to what's happening, and that you're just getting their flavor and their take on the things that are happening as it's happening. this is super successful in that field. And they said, is this something that would be good in poker? Just imagine like, how that would work and what would that would look like. And maybe we'll give it a try. I think personally, probably it doesn't work for poker because poker is a lot more slower paced and there's less things to react to. But that is a good example of people just trying to get creative and trying to look at what other industries are doing and how that might apply to ours, or indeed whatever thing you want to focus on.
Yeah, no, that's some great advice. Going back to your commentating and EPTs, what is the best place you've been on your travels at a live event, or what sticks out as your favorite place you've been?
That's a great question. Everybody always assumes it's Bahamas, which is wonderful. The Bahamas is really cool. However, what people don't realize, and maybe the Bahamas is exactly your flavor. For me, the beautiful hotels that we stay in the Bahamas, which I feel very grateful to have gone to. Let me make that very clear. I'm not complaining. To me, it feels a little bit like Las Vegas was just transported somewhere with a beach. And when you see some of the interiors of this place, you might as well be in Vegas. Like the same signage, the same tables, the same carpets, all this stuff. So for me, like the ones that really like pop, like Bahamas and stuff like that, they lack a little bit of soul in the sense that there's probably parts of the Bahamas where you get a real flavor for like what it means to be Bahamian, or I can't remember. Pronunciation is lost on me now. Some of my
Yeah.
favorite places that we've ever been to is Prague. I think Prague is one of my favorite stops of all time. As a city, it's fantastic. When we go, we tend to go in December, so it's nice and snowy, and they're like all the Christmas markets are out and stuff like that too. Another one that people seem to think is really, really cool is Monte Carlo. And again, Monte Carlo is very cool. It's the epitome of cool. But for me, again, it lacks a little bit of that sort of soul. You know what I mean? It's a
Yeah.
very rich person's place. It's very expensive, and not necessarily always because it's like you're getting the best food or whatever. But again, great to visit. I highly recommend anybody going to Monte Carlo. You should definitely check it out for yourself and make up your own mind. But then, Barcelona has a very special place in my heart too, because it's the biggest EPT every time we go, but also Barcelona as a city has so much culture, and you really feel like you're living in Barcelona. Like when you go to Monte Carlo, you're kind of in a fancy hotel next to the event, and you feel like you're there for the event. Whereas in Barcelona, you feel like you're in a city with so much other stuff going on, and you can really kind of go and enjoy all that stuff as you get on. So I guess those are my favorite stops, probably Barcelona and Prague. But obviously we've done Paris, we've done Bahamas. Um, there's just so many stops and so many memories associated with them, but I guess those are my favorites for sure.
And then I agree with you, Barcelona, by the way. It's one of my favorite places I've ever been. I get what you mean by the soul. I do love Vegas to go, but it's like I couldn't live there, man. That's what I love about Malta is like I can feel the history, I can feel the soul. Like there's something that in your favorite places in the world, like obviously that's why I love about the EPTs and stuff, because like you can choose whatever stop is meant for you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What you
I,
prefer.
Yeah, and also just to be clear, like the events themselves that we host, no matter where, are world class, no matter what. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And actually,
Yeah, we're
walking,
talking about more like the actual place
yeah,
rather
the
than the
place
actual
itself.
event.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
but also like just like walking into the poker room that we built, that PokerStars put together in the ballroom in either the Atlantis, because I went in 2019 to Bahamas, and that was at the Atlantis Hotel, and then Baha Mar was where we went the second time we went back for PSBC, not the second, well, second time for me at least. Walking into those ginormous aircraft hangar like ballrooms and the way that we dolled it up, I mean, that's unreal. Like, oh my gosh, like, are you excited to play poker? Well, go walk in there and you will be. Like,
Yeah.
it's just absolutely incredible sets and
That'd
setups
probably
and
be
stuff.
like obviously to up there with like the best poker rooms and obviously events and
Oh,
stuff.
mate,
But yeah, in terms of actual like
100%.
countries, like you said, I think we're similar where like you want that soul, you want that culture type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 absolutely.
And then obviously outside of like EPTs, not specifically like any live events, but like what countries are on your bucket list to go and play?
Great question. Oh man, I feel like I've really done a lot. I would love to go and play more APPTs. I would love to do BSOP as well. Actually, those are two obvious ones right off the bat.
Yeah.
The Asia Pacific Poker Tour I have known of for so long because lots of my friends from here in Brighton have gone and played and been very successful. My friend Sam Razavi, who I unfortunately don't get to see as often as I did back in the day, he used to go out there and win everything. There was like one year where he won like, back to back to back events. I say one year, it was probably over several years, but my memory fades. But, those guys traveling and playing out in those locations, those would be incredible. Those are bucket lists for sure. Having the opportunity to taste that culture as well, going to the Philippines, going to Vietnam and all that stuff, I think would be really fun. Brazil is way up there. I really want to go to Brazil and play in Brazil. I'm not sure why, because I'm sure the Brazilians are just absolutely destroy me, but I think that would be a fun one too. Those are the two that stand out. I've always wanted to play in Macau, but I get mixed reviews on Macau, both as a
Yeah.
place and also to play poker. I know people that play in private games in Macau, and they say it is unreal, the best games they've ever played in. But also it comes with the stipulations. You kind of have to gamble with them, like on other stuff as well. Like, and if you don't, don't get invited back. And there's all this sort of meta game, like, oh yeah, they play this one game where you just end up like losing tons of money, but if you don't play it, they don't invite you back the next time. So you kind of, it just sounds like a lot. It just sounds like the kind of like fun cash game experience that I think I would love to play in, but I'll have to get some insider knowledge to sneak out there and actually
That's what
play some fun games.
it just doesn't excite me to play. I don't play cash anyway, but then I've heard too many horror stories of private games, man, where I'm like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah, you want to stay safe, of course, but it's like I think there's I think those ones stand out for sure.
And then outside of poker, obviously you said you went to Thailand and stuff. Like, what are the best places and countries in the world that you've kind of went on holiday and visited?
Living in Thailand was really awesome.
Tell me more about that actually, because I went for 2 weeks to visit, and I just felt like
Yeah.
2 weeks wasn't enough. Like, where about in Thailand, and what was kind of that like as an experience? How old were you at the time when you went?
So I probably was like 23.
Yeah,
So man, my memory's so bad. I was sort of early 20s, I think. So it was really early on. It was kind of like straight after, out of university, or maybe a few years after university. Um, I basically, because I was going out there to meet those guys specifically, they all lived in a place called Chiang Mai, or a city called Chiang Mai, which is in the north. It's pretty well
yeah.
known because it's usually where you travel to if you want to go further north into the jungle and stuff like that. If you want to go up to Pai or whatever. And because I was going there to specifically meet them, they're like, we decided to move out here. It's just way cheaper. It's way less touristy. Like, we've done all the islands down south. Now we wanted to, like, set up a base up here. So I flew into Thailand, flew straight out of Thailand, straight to Chiang Mai, and then lived there. And they were right. It's more, at that time, it was more of a local flavor. There was still kind of a touristy scene, but it's nothing like what it was down south at all. Like, and at that point, obviously it's even more touristy now than it was back then too, way more westernized. So it did feel a little bit more like you were living with the people rather than it being, you're just going to, like, all the beaches and stuff all the time. So it was a real experience. I think after a certain amount of time, I was really craving more of that touristy stuff though. Like, I was kind of like, this is
Culture
my
shock
first
type of thing.
well, okay, like picture this. This is my first time going to Thailand ever. And everyone's like, wow, that sounds like so much fun. And all I do is sit around and play poker all day for like 12 hours a day
Yeah.
for a year. So really, I didn't get a chance to really immerse myself. I have been back since, though. I went to Phuket, and I would like to do more exploring around there as well. That was many, many years later.
Do you have any crazy stories of the time in Thailand, or are you just kind of
Man,
online grinding type of thing that you can
I,
share?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can
I
share any of
can't
those
share.
stories, man. It
Well,
was, it
well,
was, it was.
you can
To,
tell
to,
me
to,
at the
to,
next live event then off
to
the
be fair,
podcast.
that sounds really dodgy. It wasn't dodgy. It's just not very. It's just not very PG. But like it was.
No,
It was.
but it's just Thailand, isn't it? I was the same. I went with my obviously at the time girlfriend, now fiance. Like, well, Eddie,
Yeah.
our mutual friend.
Oh yeah.
He loves a party. He's one of my best mates. I love him.
I
Like, if
can.
you
I
want a night out, he's the man. You know what I mean?
I can tell you one really brief one, which pretty much okay, yeah, okay, whatever. I'll just tell you anyway. So I fly out to Thailand. I was traveling with my friend James at the time, who was accompanying me, and off we go. So we get on the plane, and like I said, we booked this like with 1 day's notice. We were just like, we're going tomorrow. We're just gonna go all in. We fly out there, we land, we fly again to Chiang Mai, we land, and immediately we're like, where are these guys? Let's go meet these guys. Let's get started. We're so excited. We're absolutely jazzed. And sure enough, we go and we meet these guys at the house or wherever we met them, and they take us out in the town. So we have a bite to eat. We go and have some drinks. We have a couple more drinks. We shoot some pool. We have some more drinks. Before you know it, we end up in this club called Spicy, which was kind of like where we ended up and like going often. It was like one of the main clubs like on the strip there. So we go in there and we're like talking to some of our mates, and our mates are introducing to some of their friends, and then we're meeting other friends, and they're all like, "We're gonna go to this other bar. It's gonna be great." I'm like, "Okay, cool. Let's go do it." So we go outside. Everyone piles into a tuk-tuk, and there's like not room for like me and this one other guy. So a local goes, "Hey, if you want, you can just jump on the back of my motorcycle, you know." And but they weren't speaking English, so there obviously wasn't a clear explanation of what was happening. We were just going, "We're gonna go with them," and he's like, "Yeah, with them." And I was like, "But we're gonna jump on your motorcycle. We're gonna go with them," and he's like indicating that that was the case. So we jump on the back of this motorcycle and off we go into the night. And after a certain amount of time, we're like, I'm not sure we're going to this other club. This doesn't seem like we're heading, towards whatever. So eventually, I don't know what the confusion was, but we get off the back of this bike and we're like, look, this is wrong. This is wrong. And they're like, okay, sure, whatever you say. And they drive off. At that point, I realize I'm in the middle of Chiang Mai on my very first day of being in Chiang Mai, and I have absolutely nowhere. I don't know where I am. My phone isn't working yet. I don't have a SIM card. I don't have any GPS. I'm just in the middle of Chiang Mai, and nothing looks familiar. And I'm just there like, huh, okay, so how do I figure this one out? So I just start walking in the direction I think it is. I walk into like a 24-hour web cafe or whatever, and there's like one person like behind this computer, and I'm just going, Chiang Mai, like am I, which way to the city? This guy's just like, that way. So I just start walking, and I think I walk for about 20 or 25 minutes before I find like what resembles a bus. I find the bus. I realize I don't even know the name of my hotel because it's all in Thai. I'm like, how am I going to get back? I reach in my pocket. I had miraculously grabbed a card with the actual name of the hotel off of the desk when we checked into our hotel. And if I hadn't had that, I have no idea how I would have found my way back. So I give it to the taxi driver. He's like, yeah, sure. So I jump in the back. He takes me home. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, whatever. I go upstairs, I get in bed, and I was like, that was a wild first day.
Welcome to Thailand. Yeah.
Welcome to Thailand. And the rest is history. Yeah, absolutely.
So would you? So you're happy in the UK? You'd never kind of move back, move and live anywhere else?
I'm not going to rule it out. I really love Brighton. I feel very privileged to live in the United Kingdom. I'm still an American citizen, but I will be getting my English citizenship soon. That was just me kind of not doing the jumping through the hoops yet because I've been here obviously for so long. Uh, I love Brighton. I think Brighton is a fantastic place to live, and the culture here is so fun, and we have so many amazing bands and stuff come and play at our venues. So it feels like you're kind of in London. You have a lot of the same amenities as London does. They call Brighton London by the sea for that reason.
Mm.
We've got so many cool sort of bars and pubs, and like in the winter, all the fireplaces are on and it's kind of cozy. And then in the summer, everyone wants to be here. So we like kind of go party on the beach and stuff. I would consider moving back to the States if the online poker situation improved.
Yeah.
I know lots of people. I have one friend in particular that plays like nosebleed stakes in Vegas, and he literally moved back to Michigan when it was legalized in Michigan to play, 510 online when he was playing like 100, 200, 200, 400, any stakes basically. He literally moved back to Michigan because the games were so good online that he was doing better actually grinding, 510 online or 25 online or whatever than he was out in Vegas, and wanted a little change of pace. So if more states do legalize and they can link up and we can share the liquidity, I would consider going back to the States, but not for the long run. I definitely would always want to come back to the UK, I think.
Yeah, to be fair, I've never been to Brighton. I need to come and visit you. But I've heard one of my best friends lived in Brighton and had nothing but great things to say
Yeah,
about
I
it.
mean, loads of crushers lived here. Manig Loiser lived here. Ben CB lived here for a little bit as well. I mean, tons of other people I've probably forgotten about as well, but like loads of people have lived in Brighton. It's actually got kind of a strangely diverse poker culture. We've had quite a few. We had several WSOP bracelets actually came home to Brighton from Brightonians. WPT trophy somewhere in one of our local casinos as well. That was won by a Brightonian. So yeah, it's definitely got a poker culture.
And then going back to kind of the countries that that you've been to, is there any? Obviously, you said you want to play in the likes of like Brazil and stuff. Is there any on you? But I actually done this recently. I think I was just on the plane. I was like, what can I do? We've got no Wi-Fi. I was like, let me do my bucket list for countries, and I can actually let me read. Let me get it and read some of the countries. If you had to say your top 5 countries in terms of bucket list that you'd want to visit, what would they be?
Okay, so at the absolute top is Japan, but the reason that it's not been done yet is because I want to go out there for like months. I want to go and like immerse myself in it and actually kind of get a sense for what it's like to really live there. I'm not sure why, but I feel like a lot of people feel that way. I also want to be there around the same time where you can go skiing, because I hear the skiing in Japan is like en fuego, like totally
Yeah,
insane.
my 2 cousins are out there at the moment. They're doing one's a ski instructor with his
Mm.
girlfriend, and his brother has just gone out there to basically to go out there and live, and they said it's just incredible.
Oh man,
Yeah,
like
that's something that like
powder up the
I
here,
want
you
to
know
go
what I
and
mean?
do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
I would love to other place I'd like to go. I mean, I'd definitely like to check out Australia at some point, but I'm not sure how high it is up on my list. Same goes for New Zealand, but again, I'm not really sure what draws me out there. I feel like it's just kind of what people say. I suppose there's probably, the Philippines and stuff like that is probably above those. So maybe it's like Japan, Philippines and Vietnam, like definitely in there for sure, that kind of thing. So I guess probably just lots of Asia. That's the kind of
yeah.
the areas that I haven't had a chance to see much. Um, and then also would love to visit parts of Africa as well too, I suppose.
Mm. Yeah, so on my top list was number 1 was New York. I just just something about New York I've just always wanted, specifically in like Christmas time. I think it's probably
Yeah.
just watching like films, like Christmas films. Um, Second is Egypt. I'm actually planning on potentially going in November for my
That's
birthday.
cool.
Always wanted to go and just see the pyramids and
I,
stuff.
I
And
I that should have been on my list too. You're right, buddy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, because I don't know if the same if you were the same in school. History to me was so boring. It was one of the least the subjects I just like was just the most boring subject. And now, like, can't remember his name. What's his name? He done that ancient apocalypse
Yeah.
program.
Yeah. Yeah.
Graham
Yeah.
Hancock.
Yeah. 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 And
And one of them was in Malta actually. He
yeah.
came and it's I didn't realize the history in Malta. It used to be obviously before the Ice Age connected to Sicily and stuff. So that just excites me now and
Yeah.
fascinates me in the
All,
pyramids. It's like they don't know how the pyramids were built. Like it's
all,
crazy.
all, all all the history about the World War II bases built into the mountains in Malta as well, and all the cliffs and everything is so they call it living stone, don't they? Because it changes throughout the day. The stone in Malta moves with the heat of the day. It's really interesting.
Wow. Yeah, see, I didn't even know that.
I hope
You
I'm
learn
quoting
something new
that
every day.
correctly.
Yeah, no,
Malta,
you probably are.
living stone.
But yeah, I definitely that ancient apocalypse on Netflix. Yeah, they do. I definitely recommend that on Netflix. There was a episode in Malta, and it's only a small country, right? It's same size as the Isle of Man, but it's just
Yeah.
so much history.
Yeah, I think another one that really inspired me too. There's a podcast. I think it's called Hardcore History. And it's basically this guy sort of aggregating and retelling famous battles, but like he's not a historian by his own admission, but I think that's just because he's got a little bit of imposter syndrome himself, because I'm not sure what else you'd call this, but he basically like will talk about like periods of war or periods of time where there were wars. And he basically goes and finds all of these specific accounts. So he really like paints this visceral, like really humanistic description of what the battle was really like, from both sides. So, he'll be talking about like the Persian wars, or like, well, there's been loads of Persian wars, but like, wars with ancient Persia. And he'll be describing like what the Greeks said and then what the Persians said on their side, and descriptions of like the hail of arrows. And he'll tell this whole thing where you just feel like you were there. And like you said, it's just a way of telling history that I think is way more interesting than just memorize the day that Christopher
Literally,
Columbus crossed the Atlantic or whatever.
that was your exam, and it's like it was. You think about the way they told it. It's like now it just fascinates me.
Yeah.
Like research. That's why I want to do my research before going to Egypt about the pyramids, because like still there's so much to learn and know, and it just fascinates me, that type of stuff. It's like they still
Yeah.
don't know really how the pyramids were made, and like that Graham Hancock, obviously he's got a lot of criticism in that world, but he just asks the like obviously shows proof in what he's kind of looking into, but like I like that where it's like and that's the issue, obviously, is like they've done these like history books for school, and he's like, no, like he actually thinks maybe the pyramids are a lot older than they say, and
Yeah.
obviously they're shutting him down because he's kind of rewriting history, but he's doing it
There
in a way where he's showing evidence.
Yeah, I'm all for the sort of hypothesis of it all. You know what I mean? I think it's yeah, and if it blows my mind a little bit and gets me interested, then I'm all in for it anyway. That's
Yeah,
fine,
it's
man.
that's where you've got to be in poker as well. It's like what like when you see like, you're probably the same when you're doing commentary or when I'm watching like a clip or a stream or whatever, and I see a really good poker player doing something different. It's like,
Yeah,
hmm, that's like maybe not
yeah,
GTO, like from what we know, but he's one of the best poker players in the world. So there's obviously a reason behind him
yeah,
doing something.
yeah. It's one of those. I think you have those moments in poker where you go, I've never considered that before. And you just allow yourself to actually go, what if I were to do this? And then you
Mm,
find a move that you can actually take with you in other situations. You know what I mean? Like stuff that, the version of you 5 years ago would have never even considered in a million years. You know, and you're like, what if I check shove the river? You're like, I didn't even know you could do that. I didn't know that was a thing, So yeah, I think that's another good example of how it's in life and in poker. Just allow yourself to imagine the unimaginable, and I think that can make you a better player, and also help you to discover other things about yourself along the way too.
just a question just come to mind then. Who is your like main players that you really enjoy commentating on, that you like when you see them on the feature table, you're like, oh yeah, I'm really going to enjoy watching them play today. Who kind of like sticks to mind?
So right off the top of my head, obviously, Juan Pardo, and like the really obvious ones as well. Like the Super Crushers. Uh, right off the top of my head, we're thinking about like Adrian Mateos, Juan Pardo for sure, Lena, of course. Like those are all
Yeah.
the people that are just obviously people you're looking forward to watching play because they're super crushers, and you know that what you're watching is like basically the apex of poker at all times. But from a humanistic level, and also this is not to take anything away from Barney Bowman because I think he's a fantastic player. I just love watching Barney play. I love the way that he interacts with the table, and also a poker crusher in his own right, and having been competing at a high level for his whole life is just insane as well. So many people get into poker, get out of poker. Barney's somebody that stood the test of time and is still out there winning events and still playing and competing with the absolute best of the best in the world. Again, not to say that I don't believe he's not the apex of poker. He is in my mind, but look forward to watching him at a human level as well.
I
I've
get what
really
you mean.
enjoyed.
I've someone that is so sorry to interrupt you, Nick.
No, you're fine,
That's
man.
similar to Barney, where it's like the test of time, and I just love. I've recently I met him for the first at my first ever event in Ireland. Andy Black, obviously just a super legend, and obviously, like I mean, you'll admit he's getting actually. I've met him in Paris again recently, and he's getting back into studying because like he was like, right, I do want to get better as
Right.
a player, but just the way he's like, I sat down with him and reviewed one of his OG hands. I still need to kind of get around to editing that and putting it out because we just the way he thinks, even just about life, was like there's definitely something him, Barney, like these just amazing minds that you could literally sit there and either watch play all day or listen to and have a conversation.
Yeah.
He spoke about 45 minutes, like about this one hand that he played against Phil Ivey when he
Yeah.
was younger, and like getting deep into like the psychology of it and stuff and why he made a certain play. And that's something definitely I think it is. I hope doesn't get lost. And I don't think it will get lost because of live poker specifically, but within
Yeah.
this like solver world and stuff and online world, I hope you don't see it as much, do you? I don't think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think and I like you said, I think the live aspect does still open up a lot of opportunities to still see some of that, just because you do need to adjust so much for players that aren't sort of playing ultimate GTO poker. But yeah, no, I completely agree. There's kind of that big debate right now as well about, do solvers ruin poker? But I guess the same could be said for chess engines and chess. Chess is still a thing. Chess is still competitive. It's most competitive it's ever been. Has it made the game harder? Yes. Has it educated people to be better? Yes. Has it murdered the game? No, it hasn't. It's actually just elevated it and made it more of an art, more of a science than it ever has been. And that's kind of how I feel about people saying, "Oh, poker has a shelf life," and it's like I don't think it will. I think what will happen is in the future of poker, if we do encounter a time when the game is so solved to the point where maybe there is like a bot that's better than humans or something, I think all we have to do is change one small element and it will just break everything. You know what I mean? You can just say, from now on, we're going to play swap hold'em. The
Yeah.
complexity of playing swap hold'em and the mentality associated with that, I really hope they do because I absolutely love that game. But we just have to change one thing, and it changes the complexity in a way that humans can still comprehend and compete at. But we would already set back the machines, 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, depending on how quickly you think the AI revolution is coming for us.
That's what I was actually going to ask you. If, like, on my questions, if you could change one thing about No Limit Hold'em, specifically tournaments, that you think would add to the game and excite. Obviously, you've just talked about swap. Then would that
Yeah.
be it, or would you kind of just slight little tweak? But is there something you've thought about in the past?
So I don't know specifically. Like swap is a great example just off the top of our heads, right? But because
Yeah.
it's one that I go back to where I think that my limited time playing swap hold'em. And again, if you guys don't remember swap hold'em, it was a game on PokerStars where basically you played regular Texas hold'em, nothing changed, but once per hand you could swap one of your cards or both of your cards with the deck. So imagine you play a hand and there's been some action, and on the river there's three clubs. Your opponent swaps one card, as it were, and then goes all in on the river. Like, the actual sort of bluffing concept is so extreme because it's so easy for you to say call, 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 and then on the river you swap one, you make a flush, you're all in. The bluffing that happened and the leveling that was happening, it was so complicated and interesting. I feel like it elevated the game so much, and it was so interesting to try and figure out. But at the same time, it was such a small change that even like the most grumpy old man would still be like, okay, I get the rules. Like, I understand. Like,
Yeah.
I can expand my mind enough to allow for this one small change, because it's also something that happens in other poker games, right? Swapping a card or carding a card, or drawing a new card, I should say. Um, so that might be a good example. I don't know if that's the best one, but I feel like that would be something that is not only simple, but then also well received and easy enough for your average poker player to consider the new hold'em, as it were.
I think that's the key, because, like you said, with Power Up, like, I had someone contact me about, like, getting involved in, like, this new app game and stuff, and it sounded fun, but that's the issue, I think. And obviously I think Stars have found that, like, that obviously they try and add new games, but it's like poker players are just simple creatures, man. I think that's why, like, No Limit
Yeah,
specifically, I always say super easy to learn, but to master is like super hard. And I think
yeah,
that's where, similar to chess, it's amazing to get into. It's
yeah,
super easy to get into, to learn the rules, but as soon as you complicate it by just one thing,
yeah,
then people just don't want to
yeah.
know it.
Yeah, poker players are just fickle anyway. You know what I mean? Like, you see the same thing in private games as well. Like, you got a great game going, and then something changes with the dynamic, and then the game is dead, and you're just like, "Ah, okay, whatever, guys. Like, just stop being babies and just play cards, God's sake."
Hmm. Again, it's just the egos, isn't it? And yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
but no,
exactly.
that is something that, and I think that, again, to go back, it's like, I think that's why I always obviously work with different brands in poker, but the brands we work with are, like, well known and obviously safe brands. Like, I always say to people,
Yeah,
yeah, there may be softer sites out there, but they're maybe not as trusted, and always stick to
yeah,
someone like a PokerStars, because I know personally from living in the Isle of Man and Malta now that they have big PokerStars offices. You obviously do as well, being an ambassador. Like, the money that PokerStars puts in to stopping things like bots and stuff, right,
yeah.
is just
Oh, it's
just
unmatched.
known to
It's
be the
unmatched in
most,
the industry
like,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, we have an entire department that handles game integrity, and actually that might even be several departments. But When you look at the sort of even just the budgetary spend on that kind of stuff, it's night and day. And I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity, Lucas, as well, but we've had sort of informative phone calls with the departments that handle that. And even in those situations where they're explaining to us how they are managing and trying to combat various forms of game integrity issue, even in those meetings, they're not even allowed to tell us all of the technology that they have to use to actually combat game integrity. That's how sophisticated some of the things are that they're doing in order to try and detect issues and cheating and stuff like that, or things where people are colluding. And that makes me really proud, because it means that there is still a lot of honesty and a lot of integrity that can be found and protected when we're playing on these sites. And it's kind of the same with spins as well, buddy. Like in a different field, but there was a lot of people that said, I will never play on PokerStars again because the rakeback isn't anywhere near as good as this other site, and spinning goes require you to have a lot of rakeback in order to be profitable. Again, kind of disagree. There should be some sort of reward system. All of those guys, mass exodus, they all ran away. They all ran off to this other site. And then what ended up happening was they were all regs, and they were all playing regs all day long. And all of a sudden they couldn't beat the games anymore because the games weren't any good. So they all left because they were trying to chase the cheap buck. And then what ended up happening was they all just drilled each other into the ground. They all paid infinite rake. And even after their rake back, they couldn't beat the games because they were playing all the best players in the world. And they all went, maybe we should have just stuck to stars where there's a really big player pool. They're looking after the players. They're investing money and getting new players on board, yada, 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 yada. And again, it's sort of a false economy thing, right? I think in poker, when we try and chase a cheap buck, we very often figure out that probably we should just be trying to get better at poker in the first place. That's probably the best way to go about doing it.
Just like most things, yeah. If you
Yeah.
invest, like most of the time, if you pay for something that's 10 times more expensive, there's normally a reason why it's that. You know what I
Right.
mean? Obviously, that it's not that in poker, right? But it's like I specifically just say, like, listen, like I just someone comes in the stream and asks, "Oh, like play on this site, or I only have access to maybe in America, right?" And it's like, "Oh, there's these sites," but I'm just like, "Just be careful, man." Like I'm obviously not affiliated with any of them sites, and I obviously I've never played on them
Yeah.
myself, but just be careful. Like just do your own research, and like if you can't play on the likes of a Stars or something, then at least then you can go and play in your local casino, and like again, we talked about like private games, just stay away from private games. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you
No, no,
can, like just go
and
in
I
your local casino. Yeah.
just on that topic as well, the kind of thing I'm talking about is extremely safe. I don't want anyone to put themselves in a bad situation just to try and be involved with games that are perceived to be better. The people I play with are some people that I've known for 20 years or something like that. You know what I mean? So it's but yeah, I'm with you on that. I think sticking to the safe ones is good, especially if you're going to be playing for stakes and having money in your account that is vulnerable. So yeah, definitely highly recommend Stars for that.
So just to kind of wrap things up, Nick, what is obviously so you had the kind of spin and go course that you said was on PokerStars Learn. Is there anything else that you are kind of working on this year, or you said there was a project then that you wanted to mention that you were doing this year?
Yeah, it is. And actually, this is a cool way to talk about it too, because I have a chance to talk a little bit more than I might do if you guys see it randomly on Instagram. But I wanted to return to my roots a little bit, because you remember I was saying, the time when I improved the most was when I was really locked into studying spinning goes and heads ups, and that was when I put in the most volume that I've ever put in as a professional. And I felt like there was a bottleneck where I just improved so much so quickly, and it was really to do with just study, repeat, wake up, sleep, repeat, wake up, grind, volume. I was absolutely hammering it. Like at the time I was living with a friend in Slovenia, and literally wake up at 8. First thing I thought about was playing cards. I would put in a session until lunchtime. I would pause for lunch. During lunch, I would review hands. After lunch, I'd go back on until 8 p.m., fall asleep, wake up. And I just did that straight for months on end. It sounds maniacal, but it was really a sincerely wholesome environment, because I had a friend there I could work with to bounce ideas off. And it was all about the focus of improving at the game. And the actual poker that was being played was just by the by. You know what I mean? It was just reps. It was just reps, reps, reps. So I wanted to return to my roots a little bit and go back to playing some more heads ups. And also it's kind of an experiment, because I want to also go back and see if the game is the same way that it was back then too, where it's so as competitive. one of the misconceptions, or perhaps it's not a misconception, we might discover is, our heads up sit and go is even viable anymore in the modern day, because players are so good, and they were back then. That's why I got better so quickly, because you had to beat really good players. But
Mm.
I basically wanted to return to that lobby, and I wanted to put in some volume, and I wanted to create some content that was short form for Instagram and for YouTube Shorts. So this challenge is going to be called something like the 250K Heads Up Hyper Challenge. I'm going to play $250,000 worth of Heads Up Hypers in 2025 at either the $50 or $100 stakes. I might include lower stakes for stream purposes, but the idea is I'm actually going to be competing at a level which many people make a living off of, or they're playing at a frequency that allows them to unlock major, rake back bonuses and stuff like that as well. Because a lot of these guys are playing with the anticipation that at the end of the year, they're going to have, a 0 or slightly less than 0 ROI, in the anticipation that they're going to get really big rewards and whatever, which of course is a thing that's been around for a long time. But my idea, Lucas, was I'm going to focus on playing a relatively small volume. I'm going to focus on the sort of quality of the game that I'm playing. I'm going to try and see if I can figure out how to beat these guys in 2025, and sort of document my progress along the way. And in the event that I'm really enjoying it, or it's something that's successful, maybe I'll take it up to 500K or a million. I know 250K sounds like a lot of money, guys, but when you're playing $100 hypers, that goes quick. That's 2,500 games. That's not, I used to play 200, 300 a day. So I could have cleared this really quickly. So basically that's the idea, Lucas. I want to put in a decent amount of volume against some of the best players in the world at some of the most competitive games in the world, and see how I fare. And the good, the bad, the ugly, I'm going to try and put all of it on my social media platforms, and hopefully you guys will enjoy that content.
So you're gonna not stream it, you're just gonna record it off stream, and then you're gonna put it as shorts on your
Correct,
socials.
correct. So I have the idea that I'll do some heads up stuff on stream, because it is interesting to talk about, from a strategy perspective.
Yeah.
But if I do, I don't want to have too much of that against the players that I'm playing at the moment. So I've already started the challenge. It's just not on socials yet, because I'm
Yeah.
still designing the reels. Um, and as you'd expect, I'm playing the same 5 guys, and they're really, really good. And I don't think I want to have my thought process, the way that I explain on stream, and all of the actual hand histories publicized in that manner for them to exploit. But I am happy to come down and play against randoms at 10s and 25s, and give lessons on how I approach those games, so people can feel like they're identifying with it, and they can actually learn from that at the same time. But yeah, that's the idea. For better or for worse, it's going to be interesting. But it's tough. They're really good. The players are good, but I think I'm starting to sort of figure out the meta.
But we'll share all your links at the end in
Yep.
terms of your socials and stuff. Just a question that's come to mind then. So we talked about a lot of strategy, right? And what you can do to get better at poker. What do you think outside of strategy, them five, let's say specifically them 5 players you're playing against, or the best
Yep.
players in the world that you've kind of like grew up with, studying with, or you've now seen that are the best in the world? What do you think separates them from other people? What do you think the best in the world are doing outside of studying that separates them from the rest?
That is a great question. So speaking specifically on these guys, and when I say some of the guys I'm playing are the best in the world, there is a guy that I've played probably 50 games again. I've only started the challenge recently, but I've probably played 50 games with him. It wasn't until a couple days ago I realized he's also sitting at the 2K heads up sit and go level. 2K heads up hyper sit and goes, guys, as in a game that lasts about 5 minutes on average, and he's buying in for $2,000 a game, and he's sitting at those lobbies, 2K, 1K, 500, whatever. What separates him from everyone else, apart from studying? Absolute tenacity, because I'm sure he comes up against some decent competition. I would say a real eye for bankroll management. Again, do you think this guy can afford to be blasting off 2Ks unless he's got like hundreds of thousands, if not millions, ready to go? That's also important. And then I think also probably just a willingness to change and adapt. Again, like when you get to a level where you feel confident to play that high, I think it's really easy to come down and be like, oh, whatever, like these bums don't know what they're doing, but then just dusting off money to them because you're assuming that they're bad. You know what I mean? I think that's a really important thing, is improving in a way that gives you confidence but doesn't make you arrogant. and actually giving every single spot that you play, regardless of stakes, regardless of opponent, the respect it requires to play the best poker most optimally that you can in any given moment. Don't let up because it's low stakes. Don't change your game because, you don't care about the money as much. I think that's really important. And I think that is something that gives players longevity over time.
And then other things that you talked about in terms of you getting a better balance with your life and doing stuff like for that's for your health and stuff, which I've been concentrating on for the last few
Yeah.
years. What have you saw from like some of the best players in the world? Even some of the PokerStars ambassadors that
Yeah.
you've took away. You've seen how they are at live events and gone, I can use that or I can get better at that to make me a better person.
I think like we've been saying in this conversation already, like the level at the top has become so competitive, and like the average player has become so much better. It used to be the case that poker players were all reprobates and they're all overweight and they're smoking cigars and they're, like sort of like this Wild West kind of like, gambling kind of stereotype. Obviously,
Yeah.
that wasn't everybody, but in order to compete at those levels, you just have to actually be really looking after yourself, because the difference between having an edge in a super high roller and being a massive loser is very, very thin. You know what I mean? You're playing against some real beasts. I would say that on the whole, people generally, not just necessarily members of Team Pro, but I think they just have to take better care of themselves. They have to be in the gym a little bit. That I think the diet thing is really important. The meditation thing is huge. I think I know you were maybe getting involved with that as well, Lucas.
I've
But
tried to. I've been in and out of meditation. It's
yeah,
something that I've always tried. I think problem with meditation for me, I don't think there's probably why I need to is like my brain just like I need to listen to, for prime example, a podcast at night because
sure,
if I sit there, my brain just constantly take out
yeah,
ideas. Like I
yeah,
need to
yeah,
do this, need to do that. Like I
yeah.
think that's where, but I think that's where I need to get into meditation to
It,
slow
it,
down
it,
my brain sometimes.
it might be the case that you just haven't found the right kind for you, because like I know that I tried a more traditional approach to it and I was the same as you. My brain is just going at a million miles an hour and I couldn't relax. I've actually started getting into, or I've been doing this for many years now, the Wim Hof method. So the, cold exposure and then also the breathing associated with that. And I find that because you're doing something actively with the breathing, there is a meditation element where you actually hold your breath for extended periods of time. But because you're in the process of doing this thing, you feel like you're doing a thing, you're engaged with what you're doing. And then because you're focusing on your breath hold, it's not as much of a distraction. But over time, it's a very subtle thing, right? Because people think, I've been meditating and my results haven't improved, but it's something you have to do over time. And I think that the difference is subtle. But when you're trying, for example, like I am, to maybe win a few percent ROI against some of the best players in the world heads up, you'll notice it. You'll notice it in the graph, but it'll take you 1,000 games before you do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you'll notice it in your results, but you have to be consistent with the way you approach it and not think that it's a magic bullet. Same goes for diet, and I know that you're pretty good on the health front, buddy. But when you just don't feel well, and it's subtle. It's not that you're sick. It's not that you're tired. You're just like, my brain's not there right now. And I think that knowing yourself again is a good way to pick up on whether or not that you're playing at your sort of peak level.
Have you struggled with that with like traveling a lot with all these like EPTs and stuff to get in a kind of do you like kind of thrive in a routine, or are you kind of one of these people that like kind of does enjoy kind of traveling and being on different like kind of time zones and diets and stuff like that?
So in all honesty, like when I'm traveling for EPTs and stuff, I'm almost always just doing commentary. So really, apart from actually being locked in and focused on, doing the best commentary I can, which is important to me, I'm not having to get into like a flow state and show up and play, the EPT main event very often. So that's not really a huge deal for me when I'm in that situation. But having said that, I do pop in and play cash very often. I play live cash here in Brighton, and that's very much just to show up and give it a go. I feel like over the years, one of the things that I've become very good at is finding that flow state very easily. So I can sit down at a poker table and just like, if I'm in the mood to play, that's important. I can just go, right, poker, poker, poker. Here we go. We're going to play some cards. And then I feel like I can find that sweet spot in my mind where I feel like I'm actually locked in a lot easier now than I could a couple of years ago. But again, that might have a lot to do with the meditation aspect of things, because when you're sitting there and you're thinking about that, I'm trying to imagine myself playing the best poker that I am. I'm trying to imagine situations where I've played what I've considered to be very good poker. I'm thinking about hands that I've played, earlier in the day or whatever, and thinking about like, was I fully in that moment? Was I really thinking about things at a good level? And I find now slipping into that state is quite easy, and I guess that could be a combination of the things I mentioned.
It reminds me of Espen when he was heads up in the NWSOP main event. I remember there was that big hands. I think maybe one or it was, I think maybe the King Queen hand, if I remember. And he was just sat there with his glasses. And I remember the other guy who's heads up against was like, "Are you meditating?" Because like he said his eyes were closed and like he was very much into that. And
Yeah,
to go back actually about a story about Espen, so he wins the tag team event with Pads. I was railing because I was there at the time, and always I met Espen in we'd done an event in London in the exact same place of Lex Live 2, to be fair, and it was an event with Paddy the Baddy, which is pretty cool, a UFC fighter
love
from
Patty.
Liverpool, and yeah, and played poker against him and stuff, and they were him, and it was just basically crew. They were doing that the Overbet Express.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, I remember.
Yeah. So, and I'd love every single one of them guys. But that was the first time I kind of met them all. And I always remember Espen was one of them. And something just like stuck out about him where it was like, he was such a nice guy, but I just, you kind of could sense there was this something about him. You know what I mean? That he was
Mm,
like, nah, like you said, there was like, he stopped content to kind of become one of the best players. But
yeah.
you could tell like, it wasn't necessarily you meet people like that you can tell instantly they've got a big ego and like, "Oh, you're a bit of a
No,
That wasn't him.
he's got a calm about him. He's got a peace about him, you know.
Yeah, I felt this something in him, which I've not seen in many people, and I've never said this to him actually, but then I kind of like similar to Pads as well actually, and then when they were heads up in the tag team railing them and they won that, and then after he goes, "Oh, do you want to come for sushi with a few like kind of like high stakes guys?" And I was like, at the time, I was like, "Yeah, go on, yeah." So we go for sushi. Best sushi I've ever had. Like get plates full, plates full. Who else was there? Pon Diddy, Alex, super high stakes,
Love Alex.
and
Yeah.
yeah, super nice guy as well. And they had a couple of friends and stuff, and celebrating and obviously a big thing in poker is credit card roulette.
Yeah.
And at the time, obviously, I had to be honest with this. I didn't tell them at the time because they're all high stakes. I'm trying to like,
I know.
I
I know the
just
feeling.
got
Yeah.
sponsored. I'm trying to like, you know what I mean? And they're like, they don't know. I'm just like at the time playing low stakes and like I've
Right.
literally got my whole bankroll to my name in Vegas at the time. I think maybe I had like 3K to my name, something like
Yeah.
that at the time. Because it's just when I was just starting out, right? Credit card roulette, right? Credit card roulette. And I should have, like, now I would just say, and I've done this recently, now, like, I'm not comfortable with this. Like, I've either not eaten enough or like, it's just too expensive where I can't afford it. But then I ate quite a lot of the sushi, not realizing we were going to do. I just thought we were going to split it and blow it. It'd be like $100 each or whatever, which I could afford. A bill was $500. And I was like, "Oh, please, just don't lose this." Obviously, go and lose it.
Obviously. See, scared money, buddy. That's it. Scared money. You're always going to lose that. You
Literally,
know it.
always. Espen sat there, just won 60K. It's a bracelet. Obviously, poor Diddy plays $500 is nothing to him. He plays that in one tournament. You know what I mean? Like I had
Yeah.
nowhere near played the $500 that I'm buying at that point. But then I go back home. I'm like, yeah, lost a lot of money. Like that included that not being a good series. Get home, Espen heads up for the main event, wins the main event for $10 million. So I'm just like, now, guys, if you want to win $10 million, come to sushi with me, but you're paying.
Perfect. He should have paid it anyway. Come on, let's be real. These bums. I don't know.
Oh
I've always,
no! And
I've always.
especially now he's 10 million. I'm like, come
I
on.
think,
So next time I see him, I'm like, you're paying for my sushi, Espen. Come on,
I
man.
think probably one of my favorite parts about being a poker player is you have a really good sesh, you won tons of money, and then you just like, don't worry, guys, I got dinner. It's gonna be fine. I
Yeah.
like that. I like the community aspect of that, and probably to my detriment because some of my most winningest sessions ever, I think, have ended up costing me a lot from the friend aspect. There's a story from when I went to the Irish Poker Tour in Killarney, which I really enjoyed, by the way. I
Yeah, I love
arrive
that.
and I ended up going final two tables in the main, so I won a little bit in that, and then I sat down to play cash, and I'm drinking Guinness, and we're having a great time, and everybody at the table is super fun, and we're all chatting, and we're all telling the stories and stuff. and we're playing really low. We're playing like 1-2 or something like that. But the next day, my buddy's like, "Hey, did you have a good time last night?" I'm like, "Mate, I'm not gonna lie, I don't really remember coming home. It was kind of a heavy one, but like had a lot of fun." He's like, "Do you know how much you won?" At one point, it looked like you had like 8 grand in front of you. I'm like, 8 grand? I was playing like 1-2. He's like, "I know, you were just crushing. You had all the money." And I was like, "Okay." So I reached in my pocket and I've got like 6 grand or something like that. And I was like, "Okay, cool. So yeah, maybe it wasn't as good as you thought." He's like, "No, no, for sure. Like my friend's really good at like looking at stacks and figuring it out in real time." And he goes, "Oh, although you should probably go talk to the masseuses, shouldn't you?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Don't you remember what happened?" I was like, "No." So I went in there, and so one of the massage girls comes up, and she's like, "Oh, Nick, thank you so much for last night. That was really nice of you. Like, everyone was being kind of funny." And I was like, "Okay, what happened?" And they were like, "You asked everyone at the table because you were winning so much, had they ever had a massage at a poker table before? And every player at the table of this 9-handed, 8-handed table put their hand up, and you paid for all of them to get a massage at the table for like 2 hours, and you paid all of us."
Oh,
And I
no.
was like, "You know what? I pay it gladly. I pay it gladly because ultimately, those are fun experiences for me, and I really enjoy
Yeah,
sharing
man.
it with the guys I'm with.
That's
So
it. That's memories. I was the same. I remember my best friend always saying to me, "You before like when you had no money, when I was like working jobs that just like was on no money, like you were always so when you got a few drinks down you, you were just buying. Everyone used to just like to just want to have a good time and like imagine when you're doing well in poker and you like get some big
oh, I love
wins
it.
like and I'll just always be the same and they're very similar in that way where it's like we just want just people to have a good time on, like whether it's in
Yeah,
our stream, whether it's friends, like that again with this podcast. I just want to, I'm having people on that I want to have conversations with, and that I just enjoy it. Like I love listening to podcasts myself, but I there was something inside me just being like, you have access to like all these, like we're friends, right? But then like
yeah,
because we're so busy, hardly like we would never sit down and have a conversation. And I think
sure.
this is where I think podcasts are becoming a lot more popular. And obviously, everyone's got a podcast nowadays. But I did want to do it at this in poker where I can have conversations, tell people stories. Like obviously, people probably just go on the EPT and hear your voice, but like there's a person behind that voice, and
Yeah,
there's a person behind someone's. So it's just someone's stream. Like most probably you're the same because you're tall like me. Like every time someone meets me, it's like fucking hell, you're tall. Like because they only see my face.
yeah, yeah. No, I get that all the time. It's same for Spraggy. Nobody realizes how tall Spraggy is until you
Yeah,
stand next
yeah.
to him as well.
Same
Yeah.
with Lex. I didn't realize how tall Lex was, but obviously I don't think I've never every person from Netherlands I've met, Sheno as well, like is just so
Yeah.
tall.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, just little one that just bring to mind then. Obviously, 'cause she's never had like you more cash and spin and goes and stuff. Because this question I like to ask is like, what's the like craziest thing they've bought after a big poker win? Would yours just be like that? Just that the kind of like having a good time with your friends, or does anything stick to man that you bought when
No,
you were younger?
I okay, it's probably something like that. Like, I've definitely gone out and splashed on my friends a lot, like when I've had a really good session. And like, me and a friend here in Brighton, his name is Curtis. Everyone we call him Uncle Curtis. He has made an appearance on my streams a few times. Me and him have a rule that if we ever win over £1,000, we take each other out to this one restaurant in Brighton and we buy each other this one particular dish, and it's like meant for like 3 people, and we pig out. I would say probably the most like snap spend I've ever done before with poker money was the day that I hit the 150K $150,000 spin and go. I lost a flip for the 150K, unfortunately, on the river. I still won the 15K, so I had 15K from that tournament. And literally booked myself a flight the next day to fly to Thailand to join my friends in Phuket. So that was a pretty quick turnaround, like I'm going to Thailand situation, um,
Did you
which I
feel like
think
good? Did you? I probably got to a point where you felt good from that, but did like what did was that like? Would you say that's one of your lowest moments in poker after like losing that flip for
no,
150K?
not at all.
No.
That's a lot of people are like, you must have felt so disappointed, but the way that I try and explain it is, if you wanted to be an Olympic runner and you made the team and you broke your leg the day before the big race, right? The disappointment you feel is associated with your expectation, right? Like when I got into spin and goes, I knew that there was a good chance I would never see a multiplier above 100x. Like, and even that, might elude me if I don't play enough volume. So there was no expectation whatsoever that I was going to hit a big multiplier. And this again feeds into this sort of like myth that like if you want to beat spins, you got to hit big multipliers. That's the only way you can profit. All this kind of thing. Like there is a lot of money and value trapped up in the big multipliers for sure, but um, in my mind, I was just going to grind it out. I was assuming I was never going to hit anything big. I was going to adjust my expected ROI based on the fact I would never hit big multipliers. It's all very, conservative. So when it happened, it was a big shock, and I was super excited to see it. And it's obviously something that very people can say they've ever hit before. It's like 1 in a million for real, like actually 1 in a million. And so when I hit it and I lost it, I was like really chuffed that I won the 15K. I was kind of bummed that I didn't win the flip because that probably would have been seriously life-changing money for me at the time. But I walked away that night and had a nice night, and I haven't really thought about it since. It never bummed me out really, and I guess that's why, because never had the expectation of hitting it.
I think it's refreshing to hear as well, because like you said, people obviously probably do like, oh, you're sponsored by PokerStars, like you're advertising this spin and goes where like it's trying to lure people into win these big multipliers, but it's like no, like I am you're showing. Yes, obviously it's fun that there is these multipliers, but like you just said then 1 in a million. You're showing that like you had no expectation of winning one of them, but you can be profitable in
Yeah.
just playing it like
Yeah.
and studying the game, right?
Yeah, it's the same as my deep run in the Sunday Million. I was extremely close to $1 million. I mean, if not a million, still super life changing money. I came 16th. I lost a flip in that as well for 16th. Still won about 30K, which is nice. But people are like, "Oh man, can't you imagine?" I'm like, I can imagine, but it doesn't haunt my dreams because I know that there's always more poker to be played, and there's always more opportunity if you allow yourself to get there. Like don't be a degenerate, don't be a gambler, don't waste your life punting off money that you don't have. Set yourself some targets, pick an appropriate bankroll, play within that bankroll, focus on being a better player and getting a higher score, not just in money, but just, improving your ROI or improving your ITM or whatever, and go from there. I have no doubt that in the next 10 years, I will exceed my, whatever target I set in terms of like, MTT winnings or something. I just need to apply myself. And if I'm sensible about the way I go about bankrolling myself, then they can't stop me. You know what I mean?
So yeah, I just said about wrapping this up previously, but this is the fun of this podcast. We just see where it goes.
That's all right.
What is your obviously you said you got the content plans from the heads up kind of challenge. What's your like longer term goals in poker? Like what have you like with me with this podcast and future plans in terms of content for me? Like what excites you? What have you kind of yeah? What are your goals in poker? Would you say?
So I absolutely want to improve my MTTs. I do feel like at this point my heads up and my shorter stacked heads up and my spins and stuff are pretty good. I do want to improve in MTTs. I would actually like to put some time into improving my cash game as well, although it's one of those things with cash where like I play so much live, it's almost like maybe a waste of time to really get into like the super intense GTO side of things when you know that you're playing in games where it's just not even necessary. And it's rare that I
Yeah.
say that because, I know enough about cash where I feel like I'm playing good pre-flop or whatever, but there's just things that you don't need to do against certain opponents where whatever I'm doing live right now, I do have a pretty good win rate in general. So I think tournaments long term in terms of poker, that's really big for me. But in terms of my poker career, I do see myself in the future, hopefully continuing to do commentary, for the foreseeable future, and hopefully one day becoming as good as a Joe Stapleton or a James Hardigan. Like I said, I work with those guys when I'm on tour, uh, you know, literally alongside them. And if one day I could get to the point where I was good enough to, consider myself as good as a James or a Joe, then
Yeah.
I think that would be pretty cool. And I think that's something that you can continue to do for your whole life. Imagine traveling to every EPT for the rest of your life and talking about the highest stakes games in the world and the most entertaining poker. And that seems like a really nice way to spend your years.
Yeah, man. And like I said, it's like it's getting people on this podcast like yourself where it's like whether it can be we can just have a conversation about life like this or people listening to this can be inspired and to go for their dreams and goals and like if you wouldn't have quit that job and gone to Thailand and like because I think I always say it's people. I do understand, and this is probably where they got the same mindset of this. I was more afraid to not kind of do that risk. And I was more scared of being like 40 years old and going, I wish I would have tried that. I wish I would have done this.
Right.
Whereas I think a lot of people are scared of taking that risk. And I
Yeah.
understand it's hard. Like I could take that risk and do that challenge that I did because I was living at home. I was young. I was 22, 21. I didn't really have I didn't have family, didn't have kids, right? And then obviously there may be people watching this is like, it's hard. They've got a family that they need to
Yeah.
support and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's why I like to ask the questions of like, what would you
Yeah.
do in that situation? And
Yeah.
obviously, you done like amazing advice before in that situation because
Yeah.
everyone's situation is different. But I think in the end, like we talked about that guy in TikTok before, um, just having like people like that to inspire you to just take the leap, man. And like, you may take the leap, and it may not be for you. Like, you might have gone to Thailand and fucking hated it,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
that might have not been for you, right? But
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't know that. You know what I mean? You don't know
Yeah.
about going to a country and like visiting and going, oh shit, like I was surprised. Like
Yeah.
I didn't think I would have enjoyed this. Or you might go for Japan, for instance, what was been on your bucket list and go, no, that wasn't for me.
Yeah,
But
it was
you know
nice,
what I
but
mean?
it's not
Like,
my jam yet. No, I mean, like, and
yeah, until
yeah,
you try it,
it
right?
yeah, it bears saying as well, like, like my mom and my family in general, and the people that I surround myself with are super supportive, and at times, especially early on, lent me money and stuff like that, and kept me afloat in situations so I could continue to live in Brighton. So, coming from a real privileged place in that sense, you know what I mean. So I was allowed to take leaps where I knew I did have a bit of a failsafe where other people just don't. So I really appreciate that. That's not always the case for everybody, but every time any of us gives you some poker knowledge or a poker advice, just remember that it's really about life. It's nothing to do with poker necessarily. And it's the same as the bankroll management thing. Like, if you're in a situation financially where you can't just afford to jump on a plane and go to Thailand and just see what happens, then it's a matter of bankroll again. It's a matter of planning. You just have to jump through more hoops in order to have the benefit of actually going and taking the leap. But assuming that you're sensible about it in the same way you are with your poker bankroll, I think that anything is really possible. And I hope more people do take the leap because, like you said, you don't want to work your ass off and then end up just regretting it later on, man. That would just be the saddest thing ever.
Yeah, and then listen, like I remember on stream once I was talking about like 9 to 5 jobs, and people like, oh, but like someone might be happy with nine. And I don't mean like a 9 to 5. I just mean like because a lot of people like the office jobs that a lot of people just don't enjoy, or whatever, is
Yeah.
obviously specifically 9 to 5. It doesn't have to be 9 to 5. I just
Right.
mean in terms of the
Something you
job.
don't enjoy. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 and that might be for some people. You know what I mean? Like
Some
it
people
might
love
be in
that,
that
and that
that.
that's cool
Yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah.
That's cool too, but that
But
doesn't mean that you can't go out on a limb and find something for your hobby and like, pursue you can still you can still try and become a chess grandmaster even if it's not your full-time job and you actually just like working in the office or whatever. That's cool too.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Nick, it was a pleasure to have you on. You were my second guest. Can't wait to create more memories with you at future live events,
Yes, mate.
EPTs. Best of luck, obviously, with everything that you've got planned for this year and in the future. Let the people know where they can follow you, and yeah, let the people know what you've kind of got on.
Sure, absolutely, guys. So you can find me everywhere at Nick Walsh TV, but I also stream at twitch.tv/PokerStars as well, of course. So check me out on stream. I'm on Twitch, I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Twitter. And of course, make sure that you follow me and follow along with the 250K heads up challenge to see how much I lose, because honestly, that's a very real outcome. So we'll see how we go.
I'll leave all the links. Putting this out on
Perfect.
Spotify and YouTube. Can leave all the links down in the description. So get following Nick. Obviously, if you're finding me through Nick's socials as well, and yeah, I've leave all my links if you want to follow them. And like I said, me and Nick have started this journey together, and yeah, we're just excited both to. I think you can see it, man. I think you can see the like that. Obviously, grinding together, being in a place now where we are just super fortunate, but we're just so excited for just create content like for you guys, create obviously value, like we were saying throughout the whole podcast. And we both just want to be good ambassadors for the game and
We want to
continue to
share it
do
with
that.
you. We want
Yeah,
to share
man.
it with you. So let us share.
Yeah. Nick, appreciate it.
Welcome, man.
If you're watching this, I think it's a follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and I'll see you for the next episode.